Welcome back. It's Beyond the Box Score. I'm Dan Schneier. That's Jacob Gibbs, and we are joined by reoccurring guest, one of my favorites, Jared Smola. And listen, Jared, I feel like we've gone back pretty far in this fantasy industry. I feel like I've known you for a little while now. We've traded back and forth just via DM and kind of contact standpoint. We've talked a lot of football online, so it's good to actually talk again with you in person. Jared is from Draft Sharks, and today we're going to talk about fantasy environment score. We're going to talk about the offenses you want to target based on environment score and the offenses you want to avoid. This is really important to me because I'm a big believer in team context when it comes to fantasy football. And so I'm excited to talk about it with you today. How are you doing today, Jared?
Good. Yeah. Happy to be on with you guys again. Love chatting with you guys. Dan, I think at Draft Sharks, we did like a beat writer series.
Yes.
Like 8 years ago. And I guess at that point, we considered you a Giants beat writer.
I technically was for 24/7 Sports, like a little beat writer, like not really on the beat, but kind of still on the beat.
But I'm not just saying this. We did close to every single team. You were like the best podcast we did in that series because you were obviously a fantasy player at that point. So you were kind of angling everything towards that, which is exactly what we were looking for.
Well, we're excited to talk some fantasy today. Jacob, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm good, man. It's summertime, so I'm kind of all over the place right now. I'm holding my mic in my hand. I've got my iPad here to help with notes. I'm super discombobulated. I was late to the show today, but I showed up, and Jared and Dan were just chopping it up, talking golf. I felt like they could have done that for 50 minutes, but I'm glad that y'all are here to talk fantasy with me instead. I'm really looking forward to it. This article from Jared is really good stuff, so I'm going to throw that up on the screen real quick for people over at draftsharks.com. Is this free read, or do I have access to this through membership or something? It's free, right?
Yep, free. Yep, totally free.
Love it. Fantasy environment score. So we spend a lot of time here on Beyond the Box Score digging into the individual player profiles, the coaches, all of the different ways in which this might interact to kind of like put the puzzle pieces together for what we get for fantasy purposes. But I think a really overlooked aspect is what actually happens during the season. Anybody who's like in the nitty gritty week to week during the season, the grind, realizes how important the schedule can be, where you've run up against it for 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks in a row with a player where you're banging your head against the wall. You swear that they should be doing better, but it's just like, man, how can he have faced the 5 best cornerbacks in the league every single week for a month? Right. And it's like, sometimes it really does be like that. And so this is kind of schedule adjacent. I have like schedule projections, schedule research is tough because like you don't know who's going to be healthy throughout the year. You don't know how these defenses are going to come together. In the same way that we have a lot of new offensive play callers this year, we have a lot of new defensive play callers. So it's all hard to project, but Vegas does project it. And so what Jared has here is from Vegas, the projected implied point per game number for each team, and then also the average combined point total for each team in each game. So looking at their opponents and like how likely they are to create shootouts, and then also to have some like ugly games. It's really, really cool stuff. So I just want to throw it to Jared first. It's not like individual cornerback matchups and stuff like that, but honestly, this is probably the most directionally accurate way that we can go about this, is like, where can we find good fantasy environments and then pick players from those teams?
For sure. I think it's huge, right? I mean, you alluded to it, Jacob, the player level stuff's important, but in a lot of fantasy seasons, just picking out the 2 or 3 offenses that vastly improve expectation and just loading up on those, like Jacksonville last year, even the Rams last year, taking anyone from those teams, Chicago, like you're going to have a bunch of hits if the offense, kind of lifts all boats. This fantasy environment score article, it honestly started out, I was just going to do another implied points per game article, which you can find anywhere, right? Like it's not tough to find. And I was kind of like, how can I make this better? How can I take it a step further and make it a bit more useful? So I came up with this fantasy environment score, which, as Jacob was saying, it starts with the implied points per game for each team, and that's the heaviest weight in this environment score. But we're also factoring in implied points per game allowed. We're factoring in how many games each team is favored in and by how much, the average over-under in all these games. And I also did, looked at how many games the over-under was 48 plus, and I called those, projected shootout games. Then how many games each team's projected to be in with an over-under of 42 or lower, which I called, low total games. So again, just kind of trying to look at more of the complete picture of these teams, more so than just the implied points per game.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Do you want to get started with one of these teams that actually, before we get into the teams, let's take it, Jacob, where did you want to go before we get into the teams? Sorry.
I got nothing, man. Let's get into the team too.
Thought I saw something I missed on the show notes. My fault there. Let's start talking with the teams here. Let's talk Colts to start.
Yeah, so I think the Colts were one of the teams that came in surprisingly high for me, I guess. 11th in fantasy environment score. They're also 12th in implied points per game. The interesting thing, though, is that this team is projected to, I think they're like 5th or 6th in implied points per game allowed. So they also have a lot of games that are projected to be shootouts. That to me it makes the passing game more interesting, right? If this team's going to be playing from behind more than they were, especially early last year when Daniel Jones was healthy. And it has me a bit worried about Jonathan Taylor, because it was obviously a tale of two seasons for JT last year. He was the RB1 over the first 10 games of the season with a healthy Daniel Jones when the Colts got off to that 8-2 start. When the Colts lost their final 7 games without Daniel Jones, JT was RB20 in PPR points per game over that stretch. Now, I don't think either of those extremes is, what we're going to get from this year's Colts. But if it's, closer to that, final third of the season, JT could have some issues, right? Because he's still a guy that kind of needs that positive game script. He's not going to play a huge role in the passing game.
Yeah, the Colts are an interesting one to me just because a lot of people have an expectation of them taking a step back. But in reality, if Jones who's already practicing healthy for the season, there's a good chance that they could almost be a surprise offense based on that evaluation. So I want to touch on them first, but let's talk about what the people want to hear. And the people want to hear about the top offensive environments to target in fantasy. You mentioned it earlier, teams like the Bears from last year, teams like the Jaguars. I want to hear about the top offenses, maybe the ones we expect, and then a team that might become that Jaguars or Bears of this year.
Yeah, I think no huge surprises at the top, but I was surprised to see Dallas come in at number 1. Right? I mean, I would have thought they were top 5 at least, but not number 1. And they're actually number 1 in fantasy environment score by a pretty decent margin. You can look at the actual scores in the article and you see there's a bit of a gap between 1 and 2 even. The Cowboys have the 6th highest implied points per game and are also projected to allow the 4th most points per game. Dallas has 15 games this season with an over-under of 48 plus points. No other team has more than 11 games with that 48 plus point,
That's
over-under.
crazy.
So Cowboys are projected to be in a lot of shootouts. That's obviously awesome. Yeah. Also, if you want to look into their playoff schedule too, I mean, it's at Rams. That's a tough defense, but it's an indoor game with, I think, shootout potential because the Rams are going to score. And then Dallas goes home for Jacksonville and home for the Giants. So, I think 2 beatable defenses, 2 offenses that, could score, and 2 games are going to be indoors. So Dallas has a nice schedule overall, and especially in the fantasy playoffs. So, and the other nice thing about Dallas is I don't think there's any screaming values on the Cowboys in fantasy drafts, but this offense just feels super safe. We know, same coaching staff, same personnel for the most part. We know what this offense is going to be. They're going to play pretty fast. They're going to lean pass, and we know where the ball's going, right? It's CeeDee Lamb, it's George Pickens, and Jake Ferguson is kind of the clear number 3. But it just seems like a pretty safe, bankable offense, even though, again, none of the players are undervalued in drafts.
One thing I really love so far, just going through some of your offense environmental rankings and just the way that it's set up, I really like the shootout factor here because I think that's so underrated in fantasy. I don't think we've ever really gotten into that, Jacob, trying to predict or at least provide context on what that means for fantasy, but it does provide a lot for just thinking about how people build out their DFS lineups. It's the same thing for redraft. You want to be in these games with a lot of shootouts and a lot of high scoring. And the Cowboys seem like one of those teams. The player that we haven't talked about a lot this year on the show that I am curious if could be a value, Javonte Williams for the Cowboys. He's starting to fall a little bit on people's minds. They kind of just assume he'll lose some of the work he had last year, but he could just end up being an absolute stud again in what seems like a similar setup to last year.
I think CeeDee Lamb's really interesting too. I mean, if you have Javonte thoughts, go for it, Jared. I've been pretty consistently high on Javonte. I think he could score a ton of touchdowns. CeeDee Lamb, though, I'm curious where you two are at on him compared to Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. I think he gets where he's kind of in this in between where he's no one quite puts him up in that range, but then he's above Drake London and everybody else that comes next. I see him very similarly to those two. I've got a few podcasts I would point you towards, but the main one is I did this 12-hour series you can win versus any coverage type, with the thesis being if you hit certain thresholds against man zone and press coverage, then you're the type of player who can get up into that 25, 28, 30% target share range. And Lamb shocked me how good his numbers looked in terms of reception perception charting. And the reception perception charting is from 2024. We don't have the 2025 data yet, but his 2024 data is like right on par with Justin Jefferson as like basically the best type of separation stuff that Matt charted over the past 2 years. And we know he's really, really good with the ball in his hands. He has been all throughout his career until last year when he's playing with a high ankle sprain. And then that brings me to the 2025 fantasy points data charting, which also paints him really highly regarded, like above Justin Jefferson last year. Maybe there's reasons why Jefferson, kind of tapered off as the year went on, but like Lamb had his own reasons, right? Playing again through a high ankle sprain and still was creating separation at a really high rate. I don't really understand why he's clearly below those guys in people's minds, because we're talking about, in Jared's model here, like the best, according to Vegas, the best, implied situation for any team, any player in terms of potential shootouts and everything. And we know he's phenomenally talented. And I feel like Dallas is set up better than ever before, where it's not so easy for defenses to just focus on Lamb because George Pickens is there, because the run game is competent, the offensive line is good. We love what Brian Schottenheimer is doing. When we did, like Ryan Heath and I did a play callers episode where we tier ranked the play callers for fantasy football purposes, and we put Schotty in the S tier with just a handful of other guys, all the guys that you'd expect, plus Liam Cohen and Ben Johnson. We put Schottenheimer in that regard based off of what he's done over the past few seasons in Dallas. So like everything's there. What's the difference between him and Amon-Ra St. Brown or JSN?
Yeah, the high ankle sprain is a good point, because that was early in the season. That's an injury that it costs guys multiple weeks, and then skill position players often aren't back to 100% at all that same season, right? Like it's an injury that can hamper guys throughout the entire year. So you could make a case that Lamb was probably never at 100% after that injury. I think the sticking point with CD Lamb is George Pickens being there. If you look though, in their 12 full games together last year, CD Lamb saw 113 targets to George Pickens 93. So it was Lamb was pretty safely ahead as the number one in that offense. Though for me, the reason I can't get Lamb above St. Brown or JSN is just JSN's gonna get 30% of his team's targets. St. Brown's going to be around there, where CeeDee Lamb is probably more of like a 25% target share guy, just with George Pickens being there and Jake Ferguson. So that keeps him below those guys. But to me, Lamb is closer to the St. Brown JSN tier than he is that next Drake London AJ Brown type of tier.
Real quick, Dan, I definitely want to get your thoughts on this, but I just want to say I get that, but I also think that he has like such explosiveness to his game, and that's being just like not taken into consideration enough, that like he has JSN kind of explosiveness. It's not, it didn't translate quite as ridiculous as JSN in terms of the efficiency last year on a per route basis and everything, but we've seen him at times 2023 to close out the season where it's like, okay, this guy is one of the most explosive players in the whole league. And I think that that's in there if this offense is uber efficient. So I don't necessarily think he needs to get up into that 30% target range that Amon-Ra St. Brown does, or JSN might, and I think his team will probably pass a lot more than the Seahawks. So I think it kind of all evens out with him and JSN. I do feel like he slept on a little bit. I'm curious where he comes. Did you mention projections, Jared? Like where he comes out for you relative to those guys? Is it close, or is he just a tier behind?
He's in the same tier as, I'm pulling up our rankings right now. He's in the same tier as JSN, Amon-Ra, Lamb, and then we have Jefferson in that tier as well. And then kind of a drop off to the Drake London, AJ Brown, Rashee Rice. So again, I don't have any like hot takes on the Cowboys. I think Lamb is pretty fairly valued at that 109, 110 ADP.
I've had some people that I feel like even want him out of the first round though. Like feel like he's a little bit overrated. Feel like George Pickens is the better receiver in the offense and stuff. I'll point you to. Let me just recommend like 6 hours of podcasting right off the bat. Another cool one here is the best and worst quarterbacks versus pressure video. And in that, I dug into kind of like what I think is potential signal for intent with what the teams want to do in terms of how offenses are designed to attack the blitz. And the Lamb versus Pickens numbers when they're healthy are insane, where it's like Pickens is obviously important for the offense, but I think this offense orients and centers around and runs through CeeDee Lamb at the end of the day. I think that's what we've seen, and that's what we saw last year when the two of them were on the field. And we'll see what happens this year. But as long as he's healthy, I think it will be that again. And yeah, just want to finish it up by again, this is why we're brought Jared on, is to talk about the fantasy environment score. It's way where are the Seahawks? Here they are 12th behind the Colts. Their shootout rate is 12%. Jason had a magical run out last year, and maybe that happens again. But I'm a little dubious, right? Sam Darnold would have to be an unbelievable outlier again in terms of deep ball accuracy. The play calling would have to be close to what it was last year, which was so good that they whooped everybody's butt all the way to the Super Bowl. And maybe the defense takes a step back or something. I don't know. This 12% shootout rate is such a significant difference than the Cowboys or anybody else around them. So I think it's worth considering at least. And I definitely think Lamb is a slam dunk pick at the end of the first round, because I think a lot of years he's a top 3, top 5 pick.
I'm on your side of this one, Jacob. I feel more strongly about getting that back end of a snake draft pick than I've had in a long time, because you can get guys like Lamb in that range. And I would say, for me, I'm very dubious about JSN in general this year. I probably won't be rostering much of him. I feel like you do. That was very much so a magical run out. The one thing I did want to bring up, though, on this, because it is important, because your case you made, Jacob, is strong. It's essentially, yeah, he has Pickens there. He's not going to get to that same target share we usually see of these dominant wide receiver one, not wide receiver one. I mean, in the top 3 scoring wide receivers, because Pickens is there. But he has this, great offensive environment, shootout score. Do you think at all, Jared, how does the possible improvement for Dallas's defense factor into the shootout score? Because I do think with Quinnen Williams there for a full season, plus the other moves they've made on that defense, they could be more mid-pack this year.
They could be, but if we're going by these Vegas totals, again, they're projected to
Vegas
allow the
doesn't
fourth
project
most.
It. Okay.
Yeah, they're projected to allow the 4th most points per game. So not only are they going to be, not in the middle of the pack, they're projected to be, a bottom 4 defense this season. So
okay, and I'll say this on those notes, Jacob and I have gone against Vegas projections in the past, specifically with the Raiders last year at times with Bowers, and they tend to be right somehow. Vegas, they tend to always know.
Yes.
Jared, anybody else that stood out to you at the top that you want to talk about in terms of environment score?
Yeah, I mean, I think 2 through 5, no surprises. It's, Bengals at 2, Rams 3, Lions 4, Bills 5. I did want to talk about the Ravens quick at 6th in fantasy environment score. To me, they're just such an easy bounce back bet as an offense in general. And to me, it starts with play volume. The Ravens averaged just 57.3 plays per game last year. That was a bottom 5 mark in the NFL. They were at 61.8 or higher in each of Lamar Jackson's first 6 seasons as a starter. So they were at 4.5 fewer plays than they'd ever been with Lamar last year. Now, part of that last year, of course, was Lamar Jackson getting hurt. But I just think if Lamar stays healthy this season, this is such an easy bounce back bet. Again, the Ravens are 6th in fantasy environment score. They're 5th in implied points per game. They also have the 3rd best average point spread. On average, they're favored by 3.9 points per game. So that all still points back to Derrick Henry. This being a high scoring offense that's playing with a lot of leads.
That makes sense. We love Zay Flowers here. Bengals. Can you talk to us, Jared, just a little bit about Chase Brown? I did a bell cow video yesterday, and people were kind of upset that I didn't mention Chase Brown as one of the true bell cows in the league. We did see him sort of split his work at the end of the year, but I think they're really going to build things out around him. You had some interesting quotes from early in the offseason where Joe Burrow was really candid about how they want to change the offense. And then they come in here with an awesome fantasy environment score too. So talk to me about Chase Brown and just how you're handling the Bengals in general.
Yeah, and Brown has interesting Samaje Perine on-off splits the last couple of years, right?
Yeah.
When Samaje Perine has been out, Chase Brown has been a top 5 fantasy back because he gets all the work. Now, when Perine's been available, he's stolen some passing down snaps, some goal line stuff, and Chase Brown's been more of a low end RB1. So first of all, I was shocked the Bengals added essentially nothing to that backfield this offseason. But that's obviously a big time mark in Chase Brown's favor. I wish he was a bit cheaper in drafts. I kind of like the wide receivers in early round 2, the AJ Brown, Drake London types over Chase Brown in early round 2. But he seems like a pretty safe bet. That's it. The Bengals are similar to the Cowboys, where they have this high fantasy environment score. They're near the top of the league in implied points per game, and we just know where the ball is going, right?
Yeah,
probably even more so than Dallas. It's Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Chase Brown. So I think he's a pretty safe pick. But I don't see Brown as a big time value where he's going in drafts.
Bengals actually scare me even more so from an environment standpoint than the Cowboys, as far as just is Vegas right on this? Because I think that defense is going to be completely different than people expect it to be. I don't know if Vegas is caught up on it. That's one I'll take the other side of if Vegas is not caught up on it. I know what kind of impact Dexter Lawrence will have on that defense, and they added 3 other defensive linemen. When you fix the D-line, it tends to fix the rest of the defense. So we've seen in places like Seattle, among other of these elite defenses that have emerged. So that one scares me a bit for people. Like, it's just as far as Burrow, Higgins, Chase aspect of it goes. So I think a lot of what the Bengals have done for us in fantasy over the years has been just horrific defense and great offensive game script. Even that, in my mind, has helped Chase Brown a lot in these 2-minute drills and these 4-minute situations, getting extra receptions and getting more goal line and red zone opportunities. But we'll see with Cincinnati. I don't want to bet against them, obviously.
Well, they are. Sorry, just the Cincinnati's defense. They're 19th in implied points against, which is a big jump from where they've been.
True.
It seems like since Burrow has arrived, right? So Vegas is with you there, Dan. That's going to be a improved defense this year.
How do you feel about this range, Jared, for half PPR? Chase Brown, running back 8, behind Amari Hampton, Ashton Jinty, who do have significantly worse fantasy environment scores. We'll get to the Chargers here in a moment. I've got him ahead of Devon Achane, Kenneth Walker, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry. How's that look to you?
I like Saquon and Kenneth Walker ahead of Chase Brown.
Okay.
But I like Brown. I like Brown over Hampton. I'm not sure if you mentioned anyone else.
Brown over Hampton. Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, I'm excited to get to the Chargers. We'll get to that after our first break. Dan, you have anything else on the Bengals?
Nope.
All righty. That's it.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ hits every highlight from all the sports that matter to you.
JJ, we appreciate your time breaking it down.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
With the plays you missed.
What a finish at the final round of play.
And analysis to give you an edge.
All we need is 20 points.
I was shaking in my boots.
Texas, Ohio State, who wins this game?
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
CBS Sports HQ, streaming free 24/7.
All right, let's talk about a team I was very, very surprised to see low on the fantasy environment score, and that's the Los Angeles Chargers. So what are your expectations for them this year, Jared?
Yeah, I get it. I get the excitement with the offense. I can't say I've been drafting a ton of Chargers. I just think the excitement is kind of baked in. And now maybe this fantasy environment score kind of backs that up. Like they're not as high as you'd expect in implied points per game. They're not as high as you expect in fantasy environment score. So, Herbert's the guy I'm most interested in. It's kind of similar to Jacksonville, who I think we'll talk about at some point here, where like it's tough to know exactly where the ball is going to go. But I think this offense is going to score plenty, and Herbert's obviously going to be a big part of that. So he's definitely the Charger I've drafted most.
I think another team that stands out similarly are the Jaguars. So these are, I think, two like apples of the fantasy nerds' eyes this summer. So we've got the Jaguars, decent projected shootout rate at 29%. But again, like weirdly lower than the Colts, So they're lower than the Colts overall, but also have the lower projected shootout rate, have the higher low total rate. I wasn't expecting the Jaguars defense to be good. I don't know if this is just a gross schedule thing or what. They are higher than the Chargers, but not significantly so. The Chargers only have an 18% shootout rate. Where are you at with the Jags? How are you handling them?
Yeah, this one kills me. This is the one I'm kind of ignoring in the fantasy environment scores. I don't want to believe Jacksonville is this low, right? So they're 14th in environment score. They're 18th in implied points per game at 23.3 points per game. They were 6th in the NFL last year in points per game at 27.9. Same coaching staff, same quarterback, same weaponry. I'm not sure what Vegas is seeing that's pushing Jacksonville down here.
What that is from Vegas standpoint, if I just want to jump in for a quick second.
Yeah.
So they ran the hottest, incredibly hot from a turnover standpoint on defense. It was completely unsustainable. The most, unsustainable of any team last year. So I'm assuming Vegas is taking away some of those points that they scored off turnovers, like in their projection of what the offense can do. They'll be in fewer of those like goal to go situations after a turnover, maybe.
Makes sense. Yeah. But we bake these implied points per game totals into our projections, and I've kind of had to inch some Jaguars down to get our projections more in line with the Vegas totals. But if I'm gonna bet against Vegas in one spot this year, it would definitely be Jacksonville. I think I'd be surprised if they finish 18th in points.
All right, one more team that showed up surprisingly low is the Denver Broncos. So you've got to really scroll down the board here to find them. and you'll find them sandwiched in between the Tennessee Titans and Carolina Panthers.
Wow.
I think that just has so much to do with the defense. They are not implied for any shootouts, which of course, could change. But this defense is really good, and I think could play even better than last year. And then they have one of the highest low rates in the league. So 29% ties with the Houston Texans. Only the Browns, Jets, Raiders, and Steelers are worse in terms of the percentage of these games that are expected to be gross. 25th in environment score, 21st implied points. Jared, I believe last time you and I talked, you were feeling cautiously optimistic about like Bo Nix maybe being a pretty good value. That dropped back to pass a lot more than people realize. Everybody has kind of come around in the fantasy community, at least among the analysts, on Jalen Waddle. So I'm curious where you're at with Denver. Is this affecting how you're approaching the Broncos?
Yeah, this result definitely got me thinking. And again, the Broncos being this low in fantasy environment score has a lot to do with their defense. They're projected to allow the fewest points per game this season. So we were not expecting a lot of shootouts from this team. This result though got me thinking about Denver's pass rate. And even last year there were some pretty drastic splits with and without J.K. Dobbins. So on the season, the Broncos finished 4th in the NFL in pass attempts. But if you look at the 10 games that Dobbins played, they were still at plus 4.0% pass rate over expected. But in the 7 games without Dobbins, that jumped all the way to plus 7.6% PORE. So
wow.
I think you're probably going to see the PROE come down, and the pass attempts probably come down a bit this season, assuming Dobbins stays healthy. Even if he doesn't, they drafted Jonah Coleman, who I think they probably see stepping into that Dobbins role. And just this defense being so good, and this team probably not playing from behind so much. We have come down a little on Denver's pass attempts. I still like Bo Nix at cost. I'm definitely still in on Jalen Waddle, but it's definitely something to consider. The environment here is going to be much different than those teams like Dallas and Cincinnati.
On the high end, so we talked about some teams that are kind of bummers here. We've got the Colts. We mentioned them earlier. They're 12th in implied points, 11th in environment score. Their shootout rate really is what surprised me. The Colts' shootout rate is tied with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which is a team I'm really excited about this year, and that's for the reason that I think the Bucs are probably going to get into a lot of back and forth passing type of games. The Colts defense is not looking great on paper. They do have like a top cornerback, but like I think this is a defense that has a lot of weaknesses as well. That's how Vegas sees it as well. So higher shootout rate than the Jaguars, Bears, and then the Commanders were the other one. The Commanders might have an even higher shootout rate. Where they at? There, 47% is the 6th highest shootout rate on the board. So that puts them right up in the same range as like the Ravens and the Rams. And that's interesting to me because it's like they're the opposite of the Rams, where it's like the Rams defense is expected to be very good. They play some good teams, and their offense is just so good that it's just kind of going to force teams to score a lot and take to the air to try to keep up with them. The Commanders, I think it's the opposite, where their defense might be so bad, even though they invested in it a lot, that they might get behind the 8 ball and then have to take to passing a lot, which is very exciting, of course, for Terry McLaurin believers. Quotes from David Lau about his usage. Maybe somebody else, don't really know. Like they could add to the offense, but if they don't, then probably rookie Antonio Williams is interesting. A lot of Aqua believers out here in the fantasy streets in July, and then Jay Daniels as well. So I'm curious your thoughts on the Commanders, exactly where this volume is going to go, but there could be a lot of volume.
Yeah, like you said, Jacob, Washington 30th in implied points against this season. They're 15th in implied point score, 8 games with an over-under of 48 plus points. That's tied for the 6th most in the NFL. So this definitely looks like a potential shootout team, which it was back in 2024, right? When Jaden Daniels had the big rookie season. Terry McLaurin had the best season of his career, fantasy-wise. So I'm definitely in on those guys. McLaurin, especially now. The tricky part with McLaurin is this does seem like an obvious team to add a veteran. Steph Diggs, to me, makes so much sense here. Yeah. And I think he'd be a real issue for McLaurin because Diggs, especially from a per-out perspective last year, that the Patriots were sort of limiting his playing time in most games. But from a per-out perspective, targets per out, yards per out, he was still really strong. And I think he would come into Washington and command a pretty big target share as at least the number 2 target there, if not the 1A, 1B with McLaurin. But this is definitely an offense I want to be in on. And we haven't, the backfield as well has a ton of questions I think this offense, could lean into that passing game, and it might have to, right? If that defense is as bad as Vegas is projecting.
And I've been looking hard for my George Pickens call this year, and it's been obviously like to fit the billing, you have to, it pretty much has to be AJ Brown or Waddle, which is fine. And I'm not sure I'm going to settle in on either of those. I'm high on both, but honestly, McLaurin is the one I feel the most confident about versus ADP right now among all wide receivers at the position. He to me is the most mispriced. And you could just look at like, not just the rapport that he's already had and displayed there with Jaden Daniels, but I really feel like what Blau wants to do is use him in a way that he hasn't been used in, but can clearly be used in and can win in. And if that coincides with the offense environment that we're projecting here, that looks like a completely different fantasy player than he's ever been, McLaurin. And I don't think people are going to value him at that because he's older and longer into his career, but he still played at a really high level last year when he was healthy.
He set a career high in yards per route last year.
Right.
Surprisingly, right? Despite all his injuries and Jaden Daniels' injuries, we're almost still hedging in our projections, and we have McLaurin at a 23.5% target share, kind of factoring in some chance that Washington adds another receiver. But we still come in ahead of ADP on McLaurin. And if we get to, mid-late August and they haven't added a wide receiver, I'd imagine we'd be, pushing him up to, 24.5, 25% target share. Then he turned into a huge value at cost.
Yep.
I've got my wide receiver rankings up on the screen here. I'm curious if there's anybody that you would clearly move McLaurin ahead of Jared.
I gotta be honest, Jacob, I can't make out those rankings. Want to tell me who's just ahead of him?
Yeah, I've got Devontae Adams and Mike Evans ahead of him, which are hit or miss. People are all over the place. So let's just start with the two veterans.
We have Adams just ahead of McLaurin, and we have Evans a few spots behind McLaurin, but they're all in the same tier.
Okay. And then you've got kind of the young guy tier, and that's Luther Burden, Emeka Ibuka, Lad McConkey.
We have McLaurin ahead of all three of those guys.
Wow. I like that. Dan, any thoughts on that? I know you're pretty high on him.
The only two I wouldn't have him ahead of out of that group would be potentially Evans and Adams. I actually have him above all the young guys there as well. I'm very, very high on what he can do. Though, to find that Pickens, I just realized he doesn't qualify. What you really need is somebody who is technically considered a number 2 on his team, but it doesn't really actually matter, which is not really the billing with McLaurin. So I'll still be searching for that, but I do think he can be an actual number 1 and command a target share like we've never seen with him, which I'm not so sure anyone on that list that we mentioned outside of Ibuka could do. So that's why I'd probably have him above all of them.
Alrighty, good stuff. Just to close out here, I want to talk about the teams with the worst implied odds here from Vegas. So you got like the Cardinals are a team that gets talked about a lot. The Jets, the Browns as well. Is there anybody that you're okay targeting from these teams, or do you have teams that you literally just check off, Jared?
The Browns are the closest team that I just cross off in drafts. They're 32nd in fantasy environment score. They have the 3rd lowest implied point total, the 5th worst average point spread. They're 3.8 point underdogs on average in their games this season. The two teams I wanted to talk about at the bottom. The first is the Cardinals.
Yep.
They're 28th in fantasy environment score, but they're tied for the lowest implied points per game, which that surprises me a little bit. I would bet on the Cardinals, scoring more points than the Browns, than the Dolphins.
I think
the Cardinals are.
Go ahead. Sorry. No, I don't want to go off. I'll say after. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the Cardinals are projected to allow pretty easily the most points per game this season, and their average point spread is 8.4 point underdogs. So I've been kind of fading Trey McBride and even not that interested in the wide receivers just because the easy answer is they're not going to throw as much as they did last year. But like Vegas is telling us this team's going to be horrible and trailing early and often. So what if it's a similar run out where they're just so bad and they're throwing 35, 40 times a game this season? It's at least got me thinking about, maybe coming up on these pass catchers.
It's very interesting because I think you bring up some good points. Like there's a much better chance of them reaching the same pace. And Jacob always mentions this, and it's such an insane stat, just how many routes Trey McBride ran last year, where he ran 22 games worth of routes for the tight end. It's why he was tight end 1, essentially to a T. And I almost wonder, like, can that not repeat itself? But the way you set it up, it can. The worry for me is I do believe Jacoby Brissett played a big role in the success of Michael Wilson and Trey McBride.
Yep.
I'm too concerned personally about Glennon, or I always call him Glennon because he really reminds me of Mike Glennon with a worse arm, but Carson Beck just totally cratering the offense to the point where we're looking at like 125 to 200 total yards a game out of that offense. So it's just something that I can't get over personally, but because they're going to get to a point. They're going to go 0, and I think Rich Rebar broke it down on the show. They're going to go like 0-5 for sure. They face like 5 great teams to start the year that they're never going to beat. So once they're at like 1-8, let's say, or 1-7, there's just no incentive to keep Brissett going because they're not going to re-sign him. So that's where it gets a little tricky for me with the Cardinals.
It's not 5 games; it's like 13 games.
13
how did they
games.
get such a tough schedule? I don't understand how that happened because they weren't good last year.
Just like scheduling, the reality is scheduling really has nothing to do, unfortunately, in the NFL with how you did last year. It's just you get 2 games where it's decided, or I think it's 3 games now where it's decided based on how you did last year. Then it's just you get 2 divisions you face. So good luck facing like the South if you can get them. And then other than that, it's like you face your division. They're facing the Rams, the Niners, and why am I blanking on the last team? Another good team. And the Seahawks, the Super Bowl champions. Yeah. So it's a rough slate.
I do think Jared's point is interesting, though.
It is, yeah.
I think that there's a real chance that Brissett gets benched at some point if they're like, 1-6, 1-8, whatever. Unfortunately, Dan, the Giants are the only team that I think that they beat in the first couple of months outside of something really lucky.
It's fair.
And if you look at, they have a week 14 bye. The Commanders are the next easiest team on that schedule. So I think it makes sense. Like if you look at them, according to Jared's research here, look at their profile compared to the other teams. It's very different. You see a lot of really high, low total rates here.
Right.
And then theirs is only 6%. And I think that makes sense is that they're down here because they're expected to be so abysmal offensively. They're not down here because like it's just going to be gross and they actually have an okay defense and teams are going to play slow against them and all this. Like they're down here because they suck.
Right.
But they have a lot of good teams that they're going to play against that will probably put points on the board. And so how does that play out? It could be similar to last year. But for us, it's just a concern with like the quarterback and if it's going to be Gardner Minshew or Carson Beck running into this buzzsaw in week 5, 6, 7. Cause that's the other thing is like, they're not getting to that bye probably. Like I don't think they're going to get all the way to the, like teams like to put the quarterback in after the bye or whatever.
Right.
Their bye is really late in the season.
Yeah.
So then it feels like it's probably going to be some Minshew games, which might be all right. It might be sort of similar to Brissett, in terms of like higher volume. I don't like that. It's interesting though to think about. Like I just did about 30 minutes with Adam Azer on Trey McBride, and it's like, it's kind of like this, where it's like, are we just overthinking it though? Like we don't know exactly how this is going to go. So maybe it's best to just draft the stud because it could be sort of similar to last year, and he is that good.
Yeah, and he's pretty consistently falling into round 3 now. I mean, it's kind of Bowers has kind of emerged as the clear tight end 1 in draft. So I mean, this is always a tough needle to thread, but the move with the Cardinals is probably maybe draft these guys. And then, look into trading them when you get to, October, maybe, the end of October before that the whole Beck situation breaks. Because I do think Beck's going to see the field. And Beck's going to see the field at the end of the season when, these fantasy games mean the most to us. So that's definitely the scariest part about Arizona.
I'm glad that you brought that up, Jared, because we're about to let you go after our second break here. And when we get back, Dan and I are going to look at every single team and look at their schedule and see if we can find some ebbs and flows to how the schedule might play out. And of course, that's an inexact science. We have no idea how it's going to go. Like it's not easy to do, but we can at least look at the beginning of the season and see if there might be some more momentum. Like Dan, I feel bad. I've had to apologize to the sickos. I've been dropping Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt in my rankings because they opened their schedule with some really tough defenses and some really good teams where it's like, this looks like they're probably going to be playing from behind in almost all of these games, And that just doesn't feel like a good start for Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. And the beginning of the season can be so important for how the team handles things, but also like how fantasy people react. And like we're playing a game, we're playing it as part of a market here. And if it starts out slow on a player that we're kind of like teetering on anyway, we don't know what it is, people are going to overreact, right? So that's kind of what we're going to be doing after the break, is looking at every team and see if we can figure that out. But before we go, I got to again just point y'all to Jared's work. Check out this article in its entirety. If you're curious about what we talked about today, you can look at all the teams. It's really good stuff. And then check out Jared Smola. Everything he's cooking up for Draft Sharks. Jared, tell us what the people can look for specifically that might be interesting and what you got coming up.
And I'm just thinking, I wish I had more time to chat with you guys, because I could have pulled like fantasy environment scores for the first like 4 weeks of the season, and we could have kind of looked at
cool.
what that, how that compared to. I did that actually for the fantasy playoff weeks. It's not in the article, but I posted it on Twitter, just who has the best fantasy environment scores for the playoff week. So that's on my X feed if you want to go check that out. I want to mention we just on Draft Sharks posted our 2026 comeback pick of the year. We've had lots of success nailing that. I will, that's a premium article. You got to be a Draft Sharks member to get that one. I will say we did mention the pick on the show today. I won't give any more hints, but he was mentioned on the show. And then of course our projections and rankings have been up on the site since like February. I update those things every day. Those are immediately, reflected in the rankings on the site. And then we have our draft war room, which is our, customized cheat sheet. It's going to sync right up to your draft. It has live draft sync. So what that means is as you're drafting, the players automatically come off the rankings for you. You don't got to worry about, crossing them off, Xing them off, or whatever. Your cheat sheet's going to stay updated for you throughout the draft. I use that tool for every single draft I do.
Yeah. Sounds like an amazing tool. Jared, thank you so much for joining the show. It's always great to have you on.
Yep. Thanks again, guys.
You think you understand how this business works, but you don't.
I now know why Monty was so stressed.
What's the plan here?
Landman. New season now streaming only on Paramount Plus.
All righty. You ready to go team by team, Dan?
Let's do it.
All right. We're going to start with the Commanders. I'm going to kind of scroll through this schedule on each of these and then talk to you about my notes. I hope it's not asking too much of myself to use one hand to navigate StreamYard, use another hand to hold my microphone. I'm wondering which hand is going to hold my tablet so I can write these notes. Okay, I'm going to throw the schedule up on the screen. Washington Commanders. Can you kind of narrate this for the audio listeners?
We've reached true sicko part of the show. Jacob's got 3 screens going. We're going team by team. This is what the people come for. And the Commanders start their season off at Philly, and then at Dallas, and then versus Seattle. So it's a very interesting schedule standpoint from just a difficulty standpoint and from having 2 interdivision games, but you also get 2 of the 3 best defenses in the first 3 weeks.
Yeah. And how do you feel like that plays out for Bill? I do feel like it's probably going to be a potential Rachaad White type of setup to begin the year. And so let's say Rachaad White ends up playing a lot more than him, maybe has a good game against Dallas or whatever. Probably not going to be super productive against the Eagles, the Seahawks, and even the Cowboys could be a better defense. But if he has done enough and these games have swung his way to where he's kind of like got that job, then I think that's going to be a potentially really nice setup for him to like carry that momentum into the rest of the season. So week 4, they have the Colts, which I mean, we just talked about like why they're so high in that fantasy environment scores, because we could see a lot of shootouts because the defense. Then we've got the Giants. What are your expectations for the Giants this year? They should be a lot better. I feel like last year they had insane talent on the defensive front for rushing the pass, and that showed up, but they just couldn't really stop the run basically. Right. And do you feel like that's going to be better?
So they had 2 issues defensively. They couldn't stop the run, and they had no outside corner coverage. They were really bad in that regard, one-on-one, especially in man coverage. This year, they should actually, on paper, be worse against the run because they lost Dexter Lawrence. They're going to try a different way to essentially stop the run. It's Harbaugh's way. They're putting in 2 gaps, 1.5, 2 gap run stuffers in the middle. We'll see if it works. Honestly, Jacob, I'm unsure. I would lean toward them being a bad run defense.
Yeah. Okay. So then we've got Commanders, Giants, 49ers in week 6. I think that defense should be better. Could be a game where they're chasing though and still put up decent points. So then they've got some more tough matchups out of the bye. So I think with the Commanders, this makes me feel a little bit better about Rachaad White, a little bit worse about Bill. I feel like you might have a bye window on Terry McLaurin after week 3. 2 really tough cornerback matchups to start out in his first 3 games. And then potentially might have another bye after like week 9. So week 7 bye, and then Eagles, and then Rams in week 8 and 9. And then the late season schedule, there is a let up. Like you still got the Vikings, you still got the Texans, mixed in there, but a lot of winnable matchups potentially. Overall, it's kind of a nasty schedule, I think, for McLaurin. I don't want to overreact to that. We don't know who's going to be playing week 15, but like the Vikings have pretty good cornerback play. The Falcons have pretty good cornerback play. The Texans have really good cornerback play. Even the Bengals, like their defense could be better. They definitely have some talented cornerbacks. But at the same time, you've got Cardinals, Giants twice. You've got a lot of good matchups. So wanted to start with the Commanders. I think they're interesting. And I'm curious how you feel about this as we'll build some momentum as we go team by team. But this is just kind of the idea is like, is this tough for Bill? Is this affect the way that you think about this backfield, which has been kind of tough to make sense of? Or is this, you don't want to overreact too much to the schedule stuff?
I don't want to overreact too much to the schedule stuff, but I do see your point and your context here. And also it's been just like a very different last 2-3 weeks for me from fantasy when I think about this offense, because I've been high on Rachaad White and we went over it on a podcast recently, and all the context says that he's been improving as an NFL running back. And I think he gets kind of pigeonholed into this. He's just a receiving back. And even like just something as stupid, Jacob, is like I'm watching the quarterback series. I don't know if you watch that on Netflix. And I'm just looking at the Bucs, and Rachaad White was their goal line back for last year when Bucky, a lot of last year, and he was producing in that area as well, in the red zone area. So I just think there's some context here that gets me a little nervous about Bill, but I wonder if the answer is just both, honestly, at the cost that they're both going for, because neither is expensive. And this to me strikes me as a possible Jaguars, Bears type team, in the sense of like, we need to find the offenses that are going to surprise, because that's what's going to really lead to winning fantasy this year. And they're few and far in between. We know a lot of the ones that surprised last year were expecting to be good this year. This might be one of the teams. I have some reason to believe it won't, based on, the schedule you brought up and my concerns about their offensive line, those two things. But the offensive environment score looks good. Jared just went over that with us. And I do believe in both of these backs at this point from a talent standpoint.
Yeah, I think it's a good team to buy into, and I think that there might be some windows to buy in. So maybe that's after week 3, or maybe that's the week 10 range. I'm really interested in McLaurin. I'm really interested in whoever the secondary pass catcher is, whether that's Okonkwo. I think my microphone was doing weird stuff earlier, but that's why I was talking about Okonkwo. I think he's potentially interesting. I think Antonio Williams could be interesting. Maybe they bring somebody else in as a signing too. And in the backfield, I think you might be able to pick Bill up. I think he might be getting dropped at some point.
Well, that's the interesting thing that you brought up. Like, that's what, like, when you talk about how we react as fantasy gamers and managers, I could totally see a scenario where people are like, should I drop Bill? Or should I pick up Bill? So it makes me more weary of drafting him. That's a good point by you.
Okay. Next team, Tennessee Titans, going to put their schedule up on the screen.
This is an interesting one.
Have I watched quarterback? Absolutely, dude. And it's maybe one to believe in Cam Ward even more. I try not to let that affect me, but I really like Cam Ward, man.
He's
I watched, they put out a documentary on him last year too that I watched. He's great. I really like the competitiveness and everything. His ability to just move on to the next play. That's something, if you dig into the coach speak, they talk about all the time. Robert Saleh and even other coaches as well, and the GM and everything. When I put these notes together that we're digging into, it's a combination of coach speak, and then the schedule stuff. So let me, I'll let you go through the schedule here and talk about that real quick. I'm going to find coach speak index just so I can plug that.
Yeah. So the Titans open up with the Jets. This is a defense that has fallen behind after trading away their 2 best players in rebuild mode. Philadelphia, one of the best defenses. Then the Giants, a defense we've talked about, probably going to be better against the pass than the run, though still has issues on the outside. Baltimore's next. That's probably not the environment we want for fantasy purposes for Tennessee.
To me, it looks like a slog. Like, even the Giants, maybe their defense sucks, but like, they want to run the ball. And I think a lot of these teams kind of want to run the ball.
Jets, probably you're right on that regard. Yeah, it does look very slog. It's like kind of 4 sloggy games.
Yeah. But I think the middle portion of the schedule sets up potentially really nicely, like shootouts, soft defenses. I think that could be pretty sweet. So like after week 5 against the Texans, which is kind of more in that slog, you've got the Colts, the Browns, the Bengals.
Oh, yeah.
Week 9 bye. Then you got the Jaguars, Cowboys, Jaguars.
Yep.
If Commanders, Lions, Colts, Raiders.
That gets nice. That gets really nice.
Week 17 against Pittsburgh is tough, but that's a long ways away. But yeah, I think you could have like a week 5-ish buy window, or maybe week 8, week 9 after around the bye week. I think you could have people kind of giving up on this team because nobody really knows what to expect from the Titans with Cam Ward and everything. Last year's data was bad. So if he comes out and struggles against the Eagles and some of these teams, the Texans, then you might be able to buy in on a Cam Ward, a Carnell Tate. Maybe start slow, right? Maybe you got the Wan'Dale Robinson stuff that they're leaning on him because you got some nasty pass rushes. Maybe not the Jets so much, but the Eagles, the Giants. You've got the Texans, some really good pass rushes. And so maybe you don't really have time for these longer developing routes for the rookie receiver. But couldn't you see the rookie receiver just going nuts here against the Jaguars, Cowboys, Jaguars, Commanders, Lions, Colts? Like, it's like 7 straight games where he could eat.
It's an unbelievable 7-game stretch. I'm not sure we'll find a better one as we go through all these teams. We'll see. You usually don't. I love that their second Texans game is buried in week 18, so you get to avoid that if you buy in the Titans this year. I think one player that stands out to me, like I'm going to be higher than consensus on Wan'Dale. I've talked about that all offseason. I just don't believe you pay somebody $80 million to not get targets. So I think the total target volume is not enough, is not baked enough into his current ADP. It's almost like people just don't care about what he gets, even though most people play in PPR leagues. But the one that intrigues me the most, honestly, is Carnell Tate. And I haven't been in on Carnell Tate at all this offseason, despite us going through our pre-draft process and those. One more shameless plug. I mean, Jacob made most of these on the show. I get at least one. I get to throw at least one in. Jacob and I did a ton of pre-draft content, and we basically just scouted the players. And so you could see our pre-draft evaluations on Carnell Tate if you go way back on the page. And we really did some in-depth stuff there. We both watched a lot of tape. And he was our favorite actual receiver. We questioned if he'd be our favorite fantasy receiver. But I'm starting to question if just like we're not talking about him enough and we're not really as invested enough as we should be, considering you've never really seen, and someone brought this up on a podcast. I'm forgetting who it is. I want to shout them out. It might have been Rebar. I don't think it was Rebar. So I apologize to who this was. But I just love making these bets, Jacob. This is the cheapest we've ever got a top 5 pick at wide receiver ever in fantasy. Like, you really think about it. And I agree. He's not Malik Neighbors, who was drafted at 6. Like, he's not that kind of prospect. I get it's partially because the class was weak, but we're talking about a top 5 overall pick at a skill position that is really just not, you don't have to invest much to get him. So with that schedule in mind, I'm starting to get higher on Tate as I think about this season a little bit more.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I don't know. I think that's why I'm interested in doing this. I feel like you and I, maybe just me, I don't want to speak for you, but like I get really focused on the analysis going into the year of the players, the coaches and everything, and how I think like trying to understand how good they are basically, and kind of give people an idea of like what the ranges of outcomes might be based off their talent and how the offense might perform and everything. And this is kind of just like trying to gamify it a little bit more, like up in terms of like how we're really playing the fantasy game. And I don't know if we've done a lot of content like that, but I think that's important too, right? I mean, that's ultimately what we're doing here, is not trying to be the best at knowing who's the best, because that a lot of times doesn't matter. We're trying to be the best at knowing how to get freaking fantasy points on our team. And Tate, I think, could be somebody who gives you a lot as the season goes on. And so I think how I'll handle this is I probably won't be super aggressive in drafting him. It'll depend on where he ends up in terms of ADP. But I think he's going to be like a prime trade candidate, target as the year.
Or honestly, you might be able to pick him up off waivers, to be honest.
Oh man, that's crazy. But I mean, if he comes out and has like 1 target or something like early on, sure. So yeah, I did want to shout out the Coach Speak Index. I've got a lot of quotes in here that we'll get to, and it's just such a good resource, especially as we enter training camp here. Greg, who runs the account, is going to come on the show in probably 3 or 4 weeks from now, I think, and just kind of catch us up on all the most important storylines.
Oh, that's great.
That he's noticed throughout the offseason. But definitely give him a follow if you don't already. And I really do think that the Discord is worth your time and worth the investment too. You can count on me to try to do my best to give you every single nugget, but there's so much in there. And so I think just you got to check it out for yourself, because you'll find stuff that's valuable. Tampa Bay Buccaneers are the next team here. I think we've got a potential like sell high window after the first couple of weeks here.
Interesting.
So they got the Bengals and then the Browns. And so on the road against the Bengals, I think we've got a very likely shootout type of situation. And then a Browns defense that I think is going to struggle. But I think the Bucs defense is easy enough to attack through the air that we might see Todd Monken be able to manufacture some offense in that game too. But after that, it gets kind of gross for a few weeks. And that's why I just think that I am just drafting the Bucks, and we'll see how it goes. I don't want to say for sure that I would be selling, but I think you could potentially sell and then buy back in because they got the Vikings in week 3, which is a really nasty defense. The Packers in week 4. They're like, of any of the teams that I look at and don't know what to do with, they're the top of the list. It's like Michael Parsons probably won't be playing by week 4. We don't know when he's going to be playing. We don't know exactly what's going on with Josh Jacobs.
New DC.
Cowboys
overrated. Yeah.
Cowboys defense could be better, but also like on the road against the Cowboys could definitely be a shootout. But then it's like Steelers seems like it's going to be gross. Panthers could be pretty gross. I think both those defenses are better than people realize.
Agreed.
But then it gets pretty nice after that to close things out. They do have the Rams in week 17. But the middle season schedule sets up pretty nice. So like if there is some momentum that's kind of lost in October, I think that could be a decent spot to buy back in on. Particularly, I think that they've got a pretty brutal run of cornerback 1 matchups to start the year. Bengals, tough cornerback 1. Browns, same thing. Vikings, same thing. I mean, Cowboys have talent at corner. Steelers have a really good cornerback 1. Panthers cornerbacks are really underrated. Falcons have good cornerbacks. Bears cornerback 1 is good. That's pretty tough, So that's something to think about. I don't know if it's going to be Ibuka necessarily, who always draws that matchup. Like the hope is
they move
that, Zach Robinson, who led the league in motion at the snap of the football last year, just moves the guys around enough that it's not any one guy who's catching all these assignments. But I think, people do kind of view Ibuka as the clear wide receiver 1 here. And he's more likely to get these perimeter cornerback matchups than Chris Godwin. So that's something to think about at least. I think the middle and end of the season schedule could be pretty nice. One quote I do have from Zach Robinson here I wanted to mention. We talked about Bucky Irving. I talked about him on the Bell Cow episode that I did yesterday. Is he has really liked what he's seen from Sean Tucker on film, and he thinks that Sean Tucker could be the short yardage back, basically, which is concerning given the usage for Bucky last year. 0 carries from inside the 5-yard line for Bucky across the whole season. So the quote is, Sean Tucker is a little sturdier and has been the short yardage guy. Kenneth Gainwell has done some short yardage. Bucky Irving can throw his face in there too. You don't want to read too much into this, but it's like, I don't love that he's like the third guy that he mentions and he just is like, well, he can't. He's Bucky's a dog. Like he plays hard. And it's like, we've seen you give work to Tyler Algier over Bijan Robinson, even though Bijan Robinson was literally the most effective short yardage running back in the league since entering the NFL is Bijan Robinson.
That's a good
point. He lost out on that goal line usage. Another thing he said is Tucker, in some of the gap schemes and some of the different things, is an explosive play waiting to happen. I'm excited about Tuck and the rest of those guys. So I think we could see all 3 backs mixed in. That would suck. I still think Bucky could be utilized enough as like a pass catcher and everything that a potential like great, buy low setup here for him in fantasy. But I do wonder how the usage might shake out. And then if he's the lead back, but he's kind of splitting it up, and then the schedule is kind of gross after the first couple of games, if people might kind of overreact to that because some of the advanced data from last year in terms of efficiency and stuff is really bad for Bucky, So if he's only averaging 3.5 yards per carry, are people just going to freak out? And if he's only playing 50% of the snaps or whatever, worth knowing, I think.
And that'll be up to us kind of decide how much we want to bake into the efficiency metrics being a product of his injury last year. Because I do think as you look at some of the early season parts of that before the injury with Bucky, he looked closer to the player we saw in 2024. I just want to say, by the way, Jacob, this is my favorite BTB when we're just riffing back and forth, giving our thoughts on teams. I actually think this is when we're at our best. So I hope the listeners agree. And I'm just curious how they feel about that. But I feel like we can kind of explore the topics a little deeper in this way, because I almost look at it like all those concerns are baked into Bucky's ADP already. Like we're assuming, like if you draft him where he's currently being drafted, Bucky, you are drafting him with the fantasy managers baking in that he's not going to get these goal line carries. He's not going to get all the touches, and we don't know if he's good anymore. We don't know what version of him we're going to see. So there just seems to be a lot of upside within that I'm still in on. I just think overall for me, this is very likely to be, Jacob, one of my Jaguars Bears type predictions this year. And I have to bet on a few teams to take that jump offensively. I just don't see too many better cases than Tampa, given the jump they're going to make on the offensive line, getting healthy with a lot of talented players up front. The fact that, like, and again, not to pull too much on this quarterback series, but you do learn a lot, Jacob. And Baker was playing insanely hurt last year. They were 3-0, beating like 3 good teams before he got hurt last year. Then he got hurt and he could barely throw the football in week 4. Like, it was like the whole game plan was limited because of that. So I just think a healthy Baker, a healthy offensive line, really good skill position. It's going to be I don't know the saying, Jacob, but I think it's the tide that rises all the boats. Is that what it is? Maybe I'm all bad when it comes to monsters.
Rising tide lifts all ships.
There we go. The rising tide lifts all ships. That's how I feel with this Bucs offense.
Yeah, that's good stuff. You mentioned Bucky on the episode we did with Theo Grimminger as one of your potential league winners at running back. Check that out if you missed that one, because Theo has some fun takes that are a little bit different than what Dan and I come to. I think that's fair. I do wonder if maybe you'll get a buy window as the year goes on, if he sort of struggles out the gate.
Right.
I agree with your sentiment to an extent, but I do think that there's an outcome where Kenneth Gainwell endears himself to a new coaching staff and just gets more playing time. I think that's pretty unlikely. I think it's a lot more likely that Bucky does that, because I think Bucky's really good, but I also don't know where he's going to be.
Gainwell's pretty good too, though. That's the problem. Gainwell's pretty damn good.
Gainwell's good, but Bucky's so much better.
So much better. Yeah.
When he's playing,
electric.
When he's playing at his best, he's fantastic. I mean, Gainwell's good, but I do think we're overreacting a little bit to what happened last year.
Probably with Rodgers just doing too much, throwing to him.
He had an absurd amount of receptions, 85 receptions, which I think is 90% a product of the offense.
He had 85 receptions last year. 85
receptions, yes.
Absurd number.
And then also he had some really big plays in like the overseas game and stuff. He had that play where it was like a fake punt and nobody touched him and he ran for like 70 yards or whatever. And it's like, that's like
not sustainable whatsoever.
Like 15 fantasy points, like that's a massive chunk play that's just like kind of random Arthur Smith shenanigans.
Yeah.
Gainwell's good. Yeah, but it's just like if Bucky is healthy and his mind's right and everything,
it's got to be him.
He's really a pretty rare type of yardage creator.
He really is. And you went over it a lot. I just want to point people toward it. If you just search Jacob Gibbs on Twitter and Bucky Irving, you're just going to see some insane historical comparisons for his rookie season. That's the type of talent that we believe he is. And if he's healthy, why can't he get back there? That's the question. The one thing I will say, just a side note, Jacob, I feel so much less confident than you do about buy low windows and buying. In my leagues, trading is hard. So that's why when it comes to these players, like a lot of times I'm just going to suggest to draft them and sit through 4 bad weeks if that's the case, because I'm not a big believer in like being able to trade for players, but maybe you are better at it than I am. So if you're a good trader and you're listening to this, or your league's very active in the trade market, totally disregard what I just said.
That's fair though. I mean, it's worth knowing. Let's flip it over to the Seahawks. The Seahawks schedule, I think is interesting, where I think you might have like a sell high window on Jadarian Price, which I think could be very much worth doing. So if you want to take a shot on Jadarian Price, I think that's valid, because the early season schedule looks like a breeze to me. Like they've got the Cowboys in a game that could turn into a shootout. Then they've got the Titans. The Titans could be pretty tough against the run, but also that could be a game where they're playing with a clear lead and the Titans offense just can't do much against Seattle. And so you end up being able to run the ball 35 times. Then they have the Chiefs, a defense that could be better, but lost a lot of pieces, is kind of remaking it. Oh, those are preseason games that I just gave you. I'm so sorry. I was like, this doesn't look that easy. Here it is. Week 1 is Patriots. A team that, we just saw get crushed in the explosive run game last year. And that was something that was a struggle for the Patriots defense all year long. And so I think that looks potentially good for Jadarian Price to rip off some big plays. Then you have the Cardinals. Then you have the Commanders. Then you have potential shootouts against the Chargers and the 49ers. And then it gets a little bit tough for a couple of weeks. But then week 8, week 9, you get back to Bears, Cardinals, Raiders before the bye week in week 11. But then at the end of the year, you have Eagles, Rams, and Panthers, which I don't like as much to close out the fantasy season. So I think that it's not only is it on paper the tough fantasy playoff schedule, but also the fact that Zach Charbonnet is way better than y'all realize, I think.
Yep.
I spent a lot of time talking about Charbonnet on this Bell Cow episode yesterday, because I think he's just completely overlooked. And I think he's coming. It might be earlier than expected, but definitely by the end of the season, I think there's a chance that Charbonnet is healthy and just the better option for a team that's like focused on trying to make a Super Bowl run because he can do the little things without the ball in his hands that Price maybe struggles in. So I wanted to just point that out. I think maybe you have a sell window for Price as you like approach the Seahawks bye week in week 11, where you might be able to trade him for if he's looking really explosive and he's got the round 1 pedigree and he's a rookie and people are really excited about it, like you might see him push up into that near running back 1 type of fantasy ranking, like top 10, top 12 running back type of consideration for fantasy. And I think that it's definitely worth considering selling him if that happens.
I think it's an excellent point. He's the exact type of player, like I mentioned, it's hard to trade in leagues. It is for me. He's the exact type of player you can trade in leagues because he's the rookie and people are going to want to trade for that if he starts hot. And I love that take you brought up because it reminds me of my worst take ever, which is I had Zach Charbonnet as my RB2 in his draft class, which if you look back at that class, you'll see why that's such a bad take.
Don't look up that draft class.
Please don't look up that draft class. But I got to bring up my bad moments with my good moments as well, which I'm surely do too much of. But it does make me feel good because even though it's a horrific take, Zach Charbonnet is so much better than people realize because he does all the little things. I heard you talking about him on a few podcasts, and someone else mentioned just the difference in his success rate versus Ken Walker's over their time with Seattle, which really does, in my mind, kind of outline why he's such an underrated player. So I do like that call. Like, even if Price starts hot, it seems unlikely that once Charbonnet's back, it's going to be Price's backfield.
Let's flip over to the San Francisco 49ers. They've got the Rams, tough matchup week 1, but I do think this is the team that's potentially capable of keeping up with them and creating a fun back and forth game there. Then you have Dolphins and Cardinals. So might have a great sell window at week 3 heading into week 4 against the Broncos. And I think that's relevant to anybody who's like, Mike Evans is guaranteed to get hurt. Ricky Pearsall is guaranteed to get hurt. Christian McCaffrey, whatever. If you draft these players and Mike Evans is averaging 20 fantasy points per game through 3 weeks, don't you think that you could probably sell Evans really freaking high, dude?
Yeah.
I mean, like, I don't know. Maybe you'll have some people who are sort of savvy where they're like, easy schedule. I don't like he's probably going to get hurt at some point. I'm not buying high. But you also might have some people where it's like they drafted whoever, Lad McConkey or whatever, like fill in the blank, young Luther Burden, young receiver who's not giving them what they thought they were going to get. And they're like, I need freaking help. I'm 0-3. And you might be able to flip Evans for that player if you believe more in the young player being able to break out late in the season or whatever. And so I think that's worth noting. I just liked the idea that like, I like buying in on these 49ers players, and I'm probably going to have a lot of Evans and a lot of Pearsall.
Yep.
And if you end up being in that situation and it makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable, this is obviously if you're playing in multiple leagues, but say you are, and you have Evans on 3 out of your 5 teams and Pearsall on 3 out of your 5 teams, you can try selling 1 or 2 of those, right? To just kind of hedge a little bit and be like, well, now if he does get hurt, at least I cashed in here. And that feels good. And I thought, given the fact that their schedule sets up so nice at the beginning, that was worth mentioning because it's Broncos week 4 and then Seahawks week 5.
We don't love that. Let's roll through a little further. I'm just curious what they got overall because they're supposed to have a much harder schedule this year than they had last year, which is the one concern with the 49ers because part of why I liked them so much last year was the schedule was so good. It does seem to be hard there with Vikings, Seahawks, and then they roll through with Giants, Rams, Chargers, Chiefs. It's not a great finish. And then Eagles is that? Yeah. It's not a great finish, I wouldn't say, for the Niners from a defensive standpoint. A lot of good defenses in there. Ultimately, I think I just trust Shanahan to generate offense, and he's got a lot of talent around him to do it.
The chat wants to know when the auction video is coming, Dan.
Oh,
August, I think.
It's an August video.
The draft, yeah.
It's a draft season video for sure. We're still formulating what to do. There's a lot of options. So if you have ideas, just shoot them out to us in the comments after any of these videos, because that's where I read the post video comments. Let me know. I've got a lot of ideas in mind, though, for that. And to make it, we want to make it a really good show if we're going to do it. So I'll be formulating that.
I've been telling people in the comments we're going to do it, and I think it'll be fun. I really look forward to it. And that's your wheelhouse, right? So I'm looking forward to learning from
100%.
Learning from the man himself. Okay, let's flip it over to the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers, man, in the fantasy environment score, they showed up as nasty.
Nasty.
Yep. And I think that every time I see the Steelers on somebody's schedule, I'm like, ugh, I don't like that. I think the defense could be really good. They bring over the defensive coordinator from the Raiders, who is like consistently churned out. Like,
was it Patrick Graham? He's there?
Like top half unless I'm misremembering, but I think that's right. Top half of the league defenses there consistently, and the Raiders have not had that much talent outside of Max Crosby.
Former Giant. Yep.
Yep, it's Patrick Graham. Okay. Steelers, week 1. Falcons, week 2 on the road against the Patriots. Week 3 against the Bengals. And then week 4 against the Browns. Week 5 against the Colts. Week 6 against the Bucks. I like that, right?
Yeah.
That looks pretty good to me.
Looks pretty good.
I don't know if, the Browns, maybe even the Colts, the Falcons, I don't know if those teams are going to be able to keep up with them enough to make these like games where they have to take to the air, but probably the Bengals, probably on the road against the Patriots, probably on the road against the Bucks. They're going to have to throw a little bit more. So I think this sets up really well for Michael Pittman, who you're pretty in on. I think Pittman and the running backs feel like really good bets to deliver some cheap points early on and then be potential midseason sell high candidates because it gets really brutal down the stretch. So Saints defense, I think, is going to be better than people realize week 7. But again, that could be one that kind of gets a little bit back and forth, could be high paced. Browns week 8 and then week 9 bye, and then Bengals after that. And then it's Eagles, Broncos, Texans, Jaguars, Ravens, Panthers, Titans. So maybe a little let up at the end, but a stretch there. I mean, Eagles, Broncos, Texans is about as bad as it gets.
That's bad.
Yeah. And so I think right around like as you're approaching the week 9 bye.
A lot good in there though.
Yeah. If you've got 2 months of data on Michael Pittman being a clear wide receiver 1 and looking like a fantasy wide receiver 2 or whatever, if you got 2 months of data of, Jaylen Warren or Rico Dowdle looking awesome and scoring some points, like you might be able to sell those guys. And either way, I think that they're worth considering in drafts because they're so cheap.
Yeah, Steelers have been just a team that I've been, if I miss out on stuff, taking in a lot of these drafts when it comes to Rodgers and Rodgers Superflex and then Pittman. It's gross. Nobody's going to like it, but I just believe in Mike McCarthy's ability to generate offense specifically in the passing game with the short, quick passing game. It's the style of offense. It's 11 personnel. It's utilize the slot, get them in good matchups, and it's get the ball out quick. It's not for everyone. It didn't work for everyone. It worked with Ben McAdoo and Eli Manning for a little bit, and then it fell off. It has its pros and cons, but I know what he's going to ask out of this offense. And it's more fantasy friendly than I think people are projecting right now because they're thinking so much along the lines of what the Steelers were last year.
Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles are really interesting, right? Like we're projecting a potential bounce back. They open up with some nice matchups here.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
Commanders in week 1 could be a shootout if Jaden Daniels comes through in a big way.
Sure.
And then Titans on the road seems like a game where we might see 20 plus touches for Saquon Barkley and lots of scoring opportunities. And then Bears on the road could be a game that turns into a shootout. So potentially a nice setup there. I could see Saquon Barkley being the running back 1 in fantasy through 3 weeks and everybody being like, told you, you're so dumb. How could you have not taken Saquon Barkley in the top 5 or whatever? After that, they get the Rams. And then the Jags, the Panthers, it starts to get a little gross maybe. But overall, like pretty nice, I think. Cowboys, Commanders again, week 7, week 8, Giants week 9, and then a week 10 bye. And then, they've got some tougher matchups in the fantasy playoffs. They have Seahawks, Texans, 49ers. Week 11 is against the Steelers, but they also have Cardinals, Colts, Cowboys mixed in.
Yeah.
So just overall, I feel like it sets up pretty well if you're wanting to buy in on the Eagles.
It's a good schedule. I still have my concerns because I think there's a lot of projection we're making with Mannion and what he can bring to this offense. And it's based on very little to nothing. They will have a healthier offensive line, though, that should help their offense. They will still have, in my mind, though, a top 2, top 3 defense. I don't expect a huge shootout upside for this offense. I think we might see closer. I think a lot of people don't want to admit it, but we may be very well seeing a lot of what we've seen the last 2 seasons from just a game script and game flow standpoint with this offense.
Yeah. That's interesting. Let's look at these and see which ones could be shootouts. Like Commanders, maybe. Bears, maybe. Rams, maybe. Jaguars, maybe. Cowboys, Commanders.
I could see Jaguars more than I could see Rams. Jaguars, Cowboys stand out as potential shootouts.
Maybe the Niners at the end.
And Niners, and that's about it for me, I think. And Colts, I think, could be just a game where they just score 1 million touchdowns and beat up on a really bad defense at the end of the year.
Yeah, that's not bad. Let me pull up the fantasy environment score and see where they rank. I feel like they were decent. I'll flip it over to your Giants while I pull that up, and you can talk to me about your expectations for the The Giants, what I saw is like maybe week 9, week 10 buy low because the second half of the schedule is
Much
really
easier.
nice. So as you think about the Giants and, Cam Scatterbo coming back from injury, Malik Neighbors coming back from injury, how do you feel as you look at this schedule? We got Cowboys, Rams, Titans to start things off.
It doesn't start necessarily very fantasy friendly in my mind with Cowboys and Rams. These Cowboys games have tended not to be shootouts for the Giants. They've struggled to score in general against that team, with the exception of the Russell Wilson game. But I think this is an offense that, generally speaking, is a buy low one because it's going to take them a little while to get going. They don't have Neighbors likely for the beginning. Who knows where Cam Scatterbo will be? They have new pieces on the offensive line and a new offensive line coach, and they have a brand new offensive scheme and coordinator. So it seems to me like it does fit the bill of a team you'd rather be in on later in the year than the beginning.
Week 4, week 5, got some nice setups here. So after the first couple of games, I wonder if Cam Scatterbo might be a buy low if his usage is kind of split early on. Maybe they're managing him. Maybe his efficiency doesn't look good because the Cowboys defense could be better than expected. They could be playing from behind against them. They definitely could be playing from behind on the road against the Rams. But then it's Titans, Cardinals, Commanders, and so you might be able to buy him before he has some big games there. Week 8 bye, Saints and Texans before that, and then Eagles coming out of the bye. So through 2 months, it could be kind of rough, I think, for these Giants. But then you get Commanders, Jaguars, Colts, Niners.
Right.
On the road against Seattle is tough. Browns, this is week 15 now. Lions, week 16.
That's good.
Cowboys, week 17. I think that sets up really well for Dart and the passing game guys. Like if Dart's healthy, if Neighbors is healthy, I could see it being huge at the end of the year. Like it's
a nice fantasy playoff schedule. Honestly, I think it's the best one we've seen yet.
But that's really speculative, right? Like we don't know what it's going to be like at this point in the year. We have no idea if Dart's going to be able to be healthy throughout the season.
Yeah, and we don't know where Neighbors will be back in year 1 back from that major surgery either.
Yeah, for sure.
What a team of question marks, man. Like even Scatterbo, we don't know.
I did look up the Eagles. Their fantasy environment score is just barely ahead of the Giants.
Yep.
Their shootout rate is lower than the Giants. For what it's worth. So don't love that really. I wanted to ask you about Mekhi Lemon. I don't feel like you and I have talked about Lemon very much. Where are you at with Lemon for this year?
He's one of these question marks for me in fantasy. I don't really have a good gauge on him yet. There's, I would say 80 to 90% of the pool I feel good about. And then there's going to be this 10 to 20% of the fantasy pool that I don't feel good about. And so it's going to take me some more time. He's going to be somebody I track in training camp and in preseason. I want to see the usage. I want to see if he's at least lining up in some 2 receiver sets, because I don't know how they're going to treat that with A.J. Brown gone, or if they're going super 11 personnel happy, which I'm be surprised if they do, given their personnel, but it's possible given Mannion. We just don't know what to expect. And he is coming from that, that McShanahan type tree. We'll see what happens there. I feel very uncertain on Lemon, but I do think it's possibly a bot. You're not paying much right now, right?
Yeah, for sure. He's cheap. I wanted to point you to this episode I did with Matt Harmon and Ryan Heath. And Matt brought up that
great episode, by the way.
He thinks that Mekhi Lemon could be like kind of sneaky productive this year if Devontae Smith and Jalen Hurts aren't really able to get on the same page. If Jalen Hurts is a little uncomfortable. Not that like those two from a chemistry standpoint won't be able to get on the same page, but basically if Hurts isn't able to facilitate what could be there for Smith within this offense, if Hurts is a little uncomfortable in the offense with the under center drop back game that they're trying to implement more of, if the aging offensive line struggles at all, and Hurts feels like he's under pressure more, that he might be bailing out on those plays. He might be looking to get the ball out quickly a lot, which would not be as good for Devonta Smith and his like timing based routes that require a little bit more rhythm from the quarterback, and might be really good for Mekhi Lemon to get a lot of short area targets. And we know they can create with the ball in his hands. We did a player profile on Lemon and really, really liked his collegiate film. And part of that was definitely the yards after the catch profile. So
I think it's an excellent point too from Matt. And the reason being like that, the way they teach that system, I've heard Sam Darnold talk about it. It's how he changed and really revived his career, Darnold. It's moving from 1 to 2 to 3 fast. So it's like if that first read is Devontae Smith and it's a longer developing route, Hurts is going to be programmed by this coaching staff to move to 2 fast, and that 2 will probably be Lemon within this scheme. It's a really interesting. I'm curious, like just from an arbitrage play of like Lemon at his ADP versus Devontae Smith. If I don't really believe in this offense the way others do, I almost feel like I'd rather draft a guy at much a cheaper price because I'm putting less weight into that offense in that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. The draft cost is definitely not cheap when it comes to Devonta Smith.
It's very different than Lemon.
Could be valid. Let's talk about the Saints. So the Saints early in the offseason were a team that you and I were pretty optimistic on. We've got some Oscar Delp chatter in the chat.
Oh, nice.
Where better to start a Saints conversation with than Oscar Delp? I love y'all. I love the sickos here. And
I did a pre-draft video on Oscar Delp. The guy ran like 47 routes almost in college. I'm joking, but like he had like 47 catches.
I think he's going to be on the field all the time. So let me give you some
very good
here from both the GM and the head coach, Kellen Moore. So Kellen Moore on Oscar Delp says Oscar Delp is a multi-spot guy. He played a lot of different positions and knows how to kind of play that multi-tight end role. Obviously, we recognize the athleticism that he provides. He does a great job out in space, got some juice, vertical speed. I think he's a very willing physical run player. And I think that's important because they don't really have that on their team. And I think that they identified this as being important. He's got some really good versatility. This is more from Kellen Moore. I think we're getting a really smart player. He'll be able to handle some volume and it will allow us to play the chess piece game when you have Juwan Johnson and Noah Fant, these other tight ends that you kind of want to put in certain positions. He'll be able to counteract that with those guys. To me, I mean, it's asking a lot of a rookie, but doesn't that sound like a guy who's like on the field all the time? And then you've got the chess piece game with Juwan Johnson and Noah Fant, who are more like out there for specific situations. But how often is that going to actually be them out there? I think Juwan Johnson, I'm pretty worried about. I know last year was really good, but I think Delp cuts into his work a lot. And so it's like, with Johnson, he has to be better than Devon Vele, which may sound like, yeah, he is, but Vele is a kind of underrated player. So is he getting on the field ahead of him as just a pure receiver? Maybe. I think those quotes are interesting. To me, that sounds like he might be a sneaky full-time player by the end of the year, Oscar Delp, which could be really meaningful for fantasy. Like let me see if I can pull this up. I did that research on how important routes are at tight end from Lord Reeves. And I think, if the Saints are as pass heavy as they were last year, we could see a ton of route volume from this player, and he could be a sneaky good fantasy tight end. So from Lord Reeves, the tight end one in fantasy each of the past 5 seasons led the position in routes run. And I did go through and look at it, and I can't find it now. It's so annoying. Over the past 15 years, the lowest that the leader in routes run at tight end finished was tight end 4 in fantasy. It was really, really high rate of being like the tight end 1, tight end 2 overall. And then I looked at not even just leading the league in routes run, but hitting 500 or more routes, which you get 5 or 6 of these tight ends per season, basically. Since the NFL went to 17 games, there have been 30 of these. So that was 2021 until now. Just getting 500 or more routes had a 67% hit rate, finishing as a top 6 fantasy football tight end, and an 83% hit rate, finishing as a top 12 fantasy football tight end. Top 12 would be a huge win from Delp. He's free in drafts. If you're in any leagues where tight end matters a little bit more for whatever reason, or you are in deeper leagues where maybe it's 14, 16 teams or something like that, I think this could be a huge win for you and potentially even give you some upside if the offense is a little bit better than expected. If he gets some of these explosive plays with his athleticism, if he ends up being a little bit more involved in the red zone than expected, I think Delp is a really interesting player. And of course, let's start the Saints conversation with 5 minutes on Oscar Delp.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're definitely more on different sides on this one than any of the ones we've gone over so far. Yeah. I do like the coach speak, and I think it is potentially talking more to their long-term expectations for a player like Delp. I think it's tough for tight ends to get on the field as a rookie. I think we've seen this with a lot of different situations across the NFL. I've heard it described. We had Daniel Bellinger on our show, Big Blue Banter, multiple times, and he's described it as, in his mind, the second toughest position to play outside of quarterback, and he went over all the responsibilities of a tight end. Essentially the only two-way player on the offense, really. Quarterback, it's its own thing. And it was really interesting just to listen to that because it's the blocking responsibilities are so much more than a receiver would be, a rookie receiver. And then they have to basically know the route, the offense from a route standpoint, the same way a receiver would have to know it. And if they're also using Delp as like a move tight end, like an H-back, just putting more on his plate. So I'm a little more skeptical. To me, what I want to see, and this is interesting, this is another point I'll bring up just because I want to see it, Jacob. I would love to see, based on Kellen Moore's past as a coordinator and his last year with the Saints, what he did with the Eagles as well. B, Tyler Shuck and what I think he can be as a quarterback and where he's at his best, and see the talent at the position and my belief in players like Bryce Lance. I'd like to see a lot of 11 personnel with Bryce Lance as the sacrificial X over there, but occasionally getting the shot plays. And also just like when he's isolated, like, all right, we'll get him the ball in space because I saw it on his tape. He can. With Tyson and with Olave on the field, like those three on the field at the same time, just seeing how explosive that could potentially be. That's where my mind goes with this offense hitting its ceiling. But it'll be interesting to see because they clearly have multiple routes they could go on offense, and he's an amazing offensive mind, Kellen Moore.
Yeah, but if Bryce Lance gets out there as the third receiver to stretch the field, that would be awesome. I think they're going to mostly have Chris Olave doing that, and I think he can succeed in that role. I think Lance is a developmental player, even more so than Delp.
I would agree with that.
If he gets that spot, if he wins that would be freaking awesome because that would allow Kellen Moore to just absolutely cook with Olave and Jordan Tyson, just moving them around all the time. Right. So much space there. That would be great.
Yeah, that's at least how I envision in my head.
Let's talk about the Saints' schedule a little bit. We've spent plenty of time on Delp and Bryce Lance, I think, at this point. Open up on the road against the Lions. Love that. That feels like a fantastic spot where we could see 40, 50 pass attempts from Tyler Shuck. And then they're on the road against the Ravens. So if the Saints defense is actually better than expected and they're able to just keep the Ravens from running on them all the time, then that could be another game that kind of gets a little back and forth shootout.
Yep.
And then they get a soft matchup against the Raiders. And then a couple of matchups where it's like, Falcons, Vikings, Giants, some Steelers, some of those teams could be tough. So I think maybe a really nice sell high window, like going into week 4, maybe after week 4, whoever starts out hot, it could be Jordan Tyson. It could be Chris Olave comes out and averages 20 points through the first month. I will say this is kind of like the Bucs. There's tough cornerback matchups throughout the year.
Right.
But I think because Kellen Moore uses so much motion, hopefully that won't matter so much. But if it is Olave primarily as the outside guy, and then like Jordan Tyson is getting a lot more motion, then that could be pretty tough for Olave. So that's worth noting, I think. Yeah. Week 5 through 8 sucks. Like I said, Vikings, Giants, Steelers bye. So you might have a buy low window a couple months into the season or something. But even like these matchups afterwards are some of the sneaky teams where it's like, oh, Panthers, that's not a bad matchup. It's like, actually, they could be decent on defense and they have really good quarterbacks. You know what I mean?
They play so slow.
Yes. And like Bengals, that's a nice matchup. It's like, well, they could be a lot better on defense and they have a good cornerback. I think some of those like Browns have really good cornerback. I worry a little bit about the fact that like they match up specifically well against what the Saints want to do, basically.
Sure.
But the fantasy playoff.
Oh, look at that. That's
fantasy playoff schedule is very nice. You've got Bucks in week 15 and then Cardinals and then Falcons.
So very nice.
Interesting. Wanted to get your thoughts on the Saints for sure. A lot of ways it could go, a lot of different players we think are talented, and we could see a lot of offensive plays here, and the schedule sets up to potentially be pretty nice, especially.
And nobody runs quick game better than Kellen Moore. So I do feel confident that like he will negate a lot of those tough corner matchups by just with the way that he schemes offense.
I hope so. All right, flip it over to the New England Patriots. Open up with some brutal matchups on the road against Seattle, and then the Pittsburgh Steelers. After that, potential shootouts against the Jaguars and the Bills, then a nice matchup against the Raiders and then the Jets after that. Some teams you could probably run on. Maybe some shootouts here against like the Bears and the Packers, week 8 against the Dolphins, another potential shootout against the Lions. So maybe a buy low window, maybe like Travion Henderson, for example, maybe AJ Brown, tough cornerback play in Seattle, physical cornerback play from the Steelers too. So maybe AJB comes out and flops through the first couple of weeks and people think he's a bust, and then he goes nuts after that because they've got a lot of potential shootouts. So I wanted to mention that on the Pats. I don't think I had much else on New England. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean,
they're the team that fantasy managers think were most helped by the schedule last year. So it is interesting to kind of look at it this year being somewhat more difficult.
It's really just those first couple games. I feel like it gets pretty nice after that. They do have Denver in week 17. But outside of that, I feel pretty good about that schedule. Yeah. Okay. We'll flip it over to the Minnesota Vikings. Kyler Murray. What can we expect here? We're going to bounce back with Justin Jefferson. Get the Packers without Micah Parsons, presumably, in week 1.
Right.
Potential shootout against the Bears. Potential shootout against the Bucks. Week 4 is against the Dolphins. Week 5 on the road against the Saints. And then they get a week 6 bye. And then they come back with even more great games.
Wow.
Colts, Lions, Bills, Packers, 49ers. Any of those games could be shootouts if the offense is good enough. Then they have the Falcons, the Panthers, the Patriots, and then the fantasy playoffs are Lions, Commanders, Jets.
Oh,
that looks really nice. I think that's my favorite schedule.
Tasty. That's the best playoff schedule we've seen yet.
I think just across the board, that's the best schedule.
It's probably across the board the best schedule. I just scrolled through it one more time. I just want to see it one more time. Yeah, this is real nice. What are we worried about here? There's not much to worry about here. Yeah. Wow.
That's great.
Wow.
If you're like, say you draft 2 quarterbacks or something, you can maybe have a huge sell high window, I think, on Kyler after these first few weeks. If you just don't believe in his talent overall to like keep putting up huge numbers or whatever.
I love that we just assume Kyler's going to win the job too. Both of us, like everyone.
Yeah. But this looked really, really nice to me. I think you could sell high after the first month of the season, but really I think that they could just keep it up all year long. So
as it stands right now, I think Kyler and Bo Nix are the 2 most mispriced quarterbacks in fantasy football from the upside in that way. They're too undervalued. This makes me feel even more confident about Kyler.
Yeah.
He might be my most roster QB.
Next up is the Dolphins. And they have an interesting case here. The Dolphins, nobody really knows what to expect. At least they do have a personalized schedule layout here. Good for them. Very cool. Don't sleep on the Dolphins. They're a legit professional organization.
Oh, yeah, sure.
They're playing with like half of the payroll that everybody else is this year because of what they've done to themselves. But here we are. So the Dolphins, I think the second half of the schedule sets up really nice. That's what I wanted to point out with them. This is a super sicko note, but Chris Bell season, maybe.
Oh, wow.
Maybe boy. Chris Bell on the comeback late in the year, getting healthy.
That'd be fun. That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah. So some not so great matchups maybe early on, but really it's not that bad. Week 6 bye. And then to close things out here, they have Denver in week 13, but other than that, like these are all pretty nice. And then they've got, I think, some games where they could be trailing and playing like catch up and passing a lot potentially out of necessity, even if that's not necessarily what they want to do with Malik Willis. I mean, they've got to close out the year. They've got Broncos and then Bears and then Packers and then Chargers and then Bills. And it's like pretty much all those games I expect them to be trailing by double digits,
True.
Also, what I like is that they're in sunny Miami in 3 out of those 4 games to close out.
Huge.
The only one that's not is Green Bay in week 15. So that's always nice because some of these teams, you draft the passing game pieces and then you get to the end of the year and you're playing in Chicago or whatever, and it's just freaking 0 degrees and windy and snowy and everything. That's something that as I've been watching quarterback has stood out is like, not only did Baker have the injuries, not only did Baker have the drops and everything, but also like he kept having to play in monsoons. I don't know how far you're into the quarterback most recent season, but that was something that stood out to me is like
episode 3 or 4. I didn't see that yet.
Yeah, no, you'll get to it. It's like, oh, great. On top of this, like I have to play in a game where I can't even grip the ball and I can't throw the ball, like, and my whole body's broken and my whole line is broken. Like, great.
I am interested in Miami, though. I think they're a team that a lot of fantasy analysts and just fantasy discussion thus far has kind of just counted out already, Jacob. And I know it's a small sample size, but Malik Willis looked freaking good, man. I get it. He's playing in a good scheme with a good coach. It's probably giving him good reads and putting him in a good situation to operate that scheme. But he looked good, man. He looked good throwing the ball. He looked good running the ball. And I wonder if he's going to be one of my guys because I'm in on the 2 quarterbacks I mentioned, and I have a strong feeling that Malik Willis will be one of them as well because he's profiled very similarly to me from a bet standpoint as what Justin Fields was last year, which is essentially like, we know what the upside is, but if it all falls apart, this is a wasted draft pick. But you don't have to pay the price. Fields was being steamed up to like QB 10 last year because of that upside. Willis is still what, in that QB 18, 17, 16 range, I assume. So you're paying half the price for a player with similar upside. And I am very curious about this, though, of course. And I know Johnny Airport mentions a great point. He does get Bobby Slowick now, which is not great for the for the fantasy sense.
Sure. Yeah. But he is, I mean, he's so cheap. There's so many
cheap.
There's so many quarterbacks to like this year, so you can get him behind pretty much all of them. I think Devon Achane is somebody where he might be just massively thinking it, where you can get him in round 2 or even sometimes like towards round 3,
right?
Which is pretty crazy. And I think they're just going to run the offense through him. So
it will require, though, like for Achane to be what you said he will be, it will require Willis to be better than what people expect, because we've seen all the stats on it. Very unlikely to buy a top scoring fantasy running back on one of the bottom 3 offenses. So if that's what they are, it will kill Achane. So I do understand why people are lower on Achane this year.
Yeah. I'm going to dig into that a little bit more.
Yeah. I'd like to see what you get from that.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Rams. So the Rams were very high in Jared's fantasy environment score.
Yep.
Didn't have a whole lot on them other than I think that maybe there's like a buy low window in week 4 or 5. So let's see what I'm looking at here. We've got 49ers, Giants, Broncos, Eagles. That makes sense. After the first month of the season, you might be able to buy low on a Kyron Williams or something like that. I mean, you're probably not buying low on Puka Nacua, but maybe Devontae Adams, some tough perimeter cornerbacks here in week 3 and week 4, about as tough as it gets. That's about all I had on LA. Some of these, there's not a whole lot to say. I will say, yeah, the Dolphins' schedule is pretty easy overall. Raiders. So week 13 bye for the Raiders. I do not think maybe Kirk Cousins lasts till then.
Maybe
it's possible we won't see Mendoza until week 14.
Well, let's see. Let's look at that. I'd like to unpack that.
I think they might start 1-6. I think they might only win 2 out of their first like 11 games.
So Dolphins, Chargers, scroll down a bit. Saints, Chiefs, Patriots, Bills. So loss on Bills, Patriots, Chiefs, and the second game, which was the Chargers. I think those are all almost guaranteed losses for me, at least. Maybe they can pull off the other 2 games, but if it gets to that point, well, there's 2 ways. So, like, first of all, if you look at the data, Jacob, and I don't have it in front of me, so I'm going to have to reference this later and come back for the listeners, but I know it in my head. Almost every single time this happens, that first overall quarterback plays sooner than people project before the season. It's almost every single time. And even goes further than that. Like, if you're a first-round pick, Jackson Dart played in week 3 last year. That wasn't supposed to happen. They want to get these guys on the field. So it either happens one of 2 ways. Either the way you're talking about, like they're just losing so many games, it doesn't matter. Or 2, they just feel like the quarterback's ready to play. And in that sense, they always bench the Russell Wilson or the Kirk Cousins type. So I actually think we're going to see Mendoza a lot earlier than people project.
Week 6 against the Bills, week 7 against the Rams, then winnable game on the road against the Jets, and then week 9, 49ers, week 10, Seahawks, week 11, Broncos. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like
it's bad. You don't want to throw them into that, but like, what else can you do?
Their winnable games are the Dolphins and the Saints and the Jets, and 2 out of those 3 are on the road. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I don't know if they'll be favored in any of their games after week 1.
No.
Until
the Browns game.
Maybe week 12 on the road against the Browns or something.
It's rough, but they're going to have to play. If they believe he's ready, they'll play him. I don't know where they'll be with that, but he seemed pretty ready, man.
Mendoza?
He seems ready to me.
Yeah, we'll see. Chargers. The Chargers, pretty nice to open up the season. Could be some massive numbers from Amari and Hampton here. We got Cardinals at home, Raiders at home, and then on the road against the Bills. And if as long as they're not getting the doors blown off against Buffalo, I think that's a team that they can potentially run on.
That is a fun start to the season for fantasy.
Love that. But then week 4 through 9 is pretty nuts. On the road against Seattle, home against Denver, on the road against the Chiefs, bye in week 7. Week 8 on the road against the Rams, week 9 against the Houston Texans.
Ugh. That's rough.
That is really rough. Yeah. So I think there's a sell high window after week 3. You might be able to get a absolute like fortune back for Amari and Hampton.
Yep.
Maybe it's Lad McConkey, whoever, maybe QJ has one of those, hot starts like he does. But man, I think this next month and a half of football is going to be pretty nasty.
It feels like this is going to be a blind spot for me, the Chargers, because just based on this month and a half of football and what Jared Smola just talked about earlier on the show, Jacob, where the Chargers were not a good fantasy environment, at least according to his projections. And that makes sense. Like the Harbaughs don't want to play these shootout games. I may be overrating the hell out of this offense for fantasy, despite everything telling me that, like, if they're so good and so efficient, it might not matter. I don't know. It's going to be tough for me on this one, Jacob. I'm not sure where I'll stand because I think I'm leaning still toward just buying all in on this offense because I just love them so much.
Yeah. To close out the season, they've got Jets in week 11, Ravens in week 10. I don't think I said that. So Ravens, Jets, and then Patriots, Bucks, Raiders, 49ers.
It gets nice at the end.
Dolphins, and then maybe a shootout against the Chiefs in week 17.
Is that at Chiefs or is that in Los Angeles?
I don't. Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, that feels good.
So yeah, I really love that. I really like it to close out. They're on the road against Miami, San Francisco at home. So their fantasy playoff schedule is pretty much all nice in terms of weather and everything.
Yeah.
So potential sell high window after week 3, potential buy low window around mid-season is basically what I would say on the Chargers.
Yeah.
The Chiefs, Broncos week 1, Colts week 2, Dolphins.
What's the latest on Mahomes, by the way? Is he playing week 1? Do you have any idea?
I believe so.
Okay. Wow. What a recovery.
Dolphins week 3, Raiders week 4. So I think it could be a really nice start for Kenneth Walker.
Ooh, yep.
3 out of 4 games look really nice.
Yep.
Broncos, if anything, I think the way to attack the Broncos is with a running back. And then a week 5 bye. So could be a really nice start for him. I've got a quote from Eric Bieniemy that, like, the one thing that he wants Walker to get better at is just understanding that he needs to become a better player with the balls not in his hands, which is classic.
Yep.
It makes sense, right? That's what they need. So I like that because it's like he's talking about it being a better route runner on the perimeter and stuff, like what value he's going to add when the ball is not in his hands. To me, that's like hoping that he can be somebody who's out there all the time for you and not just an early downs guy that you give the ball to create explosive plays in the run game, which would be great if he could earn that bell cow.
That's what I'm curious, just to pause on that for a second. Bieniemy was with Swift last year, right? I'm not mistaking that. Wasn't he with Swift? Yeah. And Swift had by far and away his most efficient years of running. Just really night and day. I think you went over the stat on one of the podcasts I listened to recently. I just binged a bunch of the episodes that you guys did last week on the show. And it's basically he went from like the least efficient running back in space behind the line of scrimmage to Swift to almost like the most in one season. I wonder, I've been soft running this in my head, Jacob. I wonder if we're going to get back to some old school Andy Reid offense and old school maybe Bieniemy Reid offense where they used to use their running backs as a big part of their passing game via the screen game. They were one of like the best designed screen teams because we've seen some of the flashes of when that Seahawks have actually tried to use Walker as a receiver, and he's been so freaking good because he's so good in space. At the beginning of like a season, I think it was last year or the year before, Walker was like really utilizing the passing game and really effective. That's one of the things that like I think about throughout this fantasy pre-draft season. And I'm like, it leads me to being a lot higher on Walker than a lot of other people are. Do you think that could be a bigger part of their offense this year with him?
Could be. They've talked about it. Like I think they want to get him going that way. That's why I've been a little bit hesitant on Rashee Rice. Anybody who was around last draft season might remember that I thought Rice was a great fantasy buy.
Yep.
It's not only that I'm like sick of Rice with the off-field stuff. I am like just point blank, like grow up. But it's ridiculous.
Oh, I took that the other way. I thought I see what you're saying now. You're sick of who he is as a human. I thought you meant like you're sick of how the offense ran through him. I totally understood that too. Both things.
I don't know him as a human, to be clear. I'm sick of the choices that he continues to make and how it seems to not take into consideration like how it affects the team and everything else.
Yes, fair.
It's just not professional. It's kind of crazy because you're 4 or 5 years into your career. What's going on?
No.
But I think also, in addition to the off-field risk, that there's a real chance that Walker getting more involved in this way, whether that's as a runner or a pass catcher, might result in fewer of these spam short yardage opportunities for Rice. I think it makes a lot of sense. We got a profile out on Kenneth Walker from about 4 months ago when we really started digging into stuff together, Dan and I. No, this was just me. You and I did the Mike Evans one.
Yeah.
25 minutes on Walker, dug into all the Eric Bieniemy history and everything, like all the reasons to be excited. I think it could be a really good run game, potentially for the Chiefs, which we have not seen recently, but I think there's some reasons to believe that Bieniemy could boost things here. The best Andy Reid run games have come under Eric Bieniemy, even better than like the Andy Reid, Jamal Charles days. So that's interesting to me. And then last thing I would note on the Chiefs, as long as these quarterbacks are healthy that they're going to be facing at the end of the year, they've got to close out the season starting in week 12, Josh Allen, Matthew Stafford, Joe Burrow, Drake May, Brock Purdy, Justin Herbert. That could be really fun. That could be really fun, right? Like if those teams are healthy, that could be a lot of back and forth, high scoring type of games.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Jaguars.
Buying back in on Mahomes. Is this finally the year I can get him the cheapest I've ever been able to get him? It might be, Jacob. I might be back.
Jaguars, first 6 weeks are pretty tough, and it does have me a little bit worried about Bashal Tutin. It also has me worried about Brian Thomas Jr. In terms of the cornerback one matchup. So you've got Browns, Broncos, Patriots, Bengals, Eagles, Texans.
Oh man,
who's the worst cornerback there?
Literal toughest cornerback matchup I've ever seen. Those are probably there's not many like lockdown, shutdown corners in the NFL. It's a thing that people don't realize. Most of these corners stink, and it's just a tough position to play. But if you want to find them, you got them right here with the Broncos, the Patriots. That's two of the best in the NFL from Gonzalez and Surtain. You have it with the Bengals with my boy from Michigan, who I'm blanking on, who I love. He's small but amazing. Kenyon Mitchell. And then the Texans, either side, you're screwed. Stingley or Lassiter, or whoever it is on the other side. I'm blanking on that too. But yeah, it's as good as it gets.
Yeah, so that's pretty tough. I think you might have a buy low window a couple months into the season. They've got a week 7 bye, and then they come out and get the Colts, Ravens, Titans, Giants, Titans again, Bears. Easy. But then Steelers, Texans, Cowboys, Commanders. So a couple of tough ones there to close out. But overall, that's pretty nice. And I think you might be able to buy in on the perimeter receivers if you are so inclined. But yeah, more so, I just want to stay here for a second and focus on this. So tough cornerback ones, but also good teams and a lot of games where they could be losing. And Jacksonville is another team that we've been a little surprised on where Vegas has them in terms of implied points. Right. So starting week 2, they're on the road against the Broncos. That could be a tough game for the offense. Week 3 could be a game where they're just losing. That's against the Patriots. Week 4 could be a game where they're losing. They're on the road against the Bengals. And then week 5 and 6 are really good defenses, really good teams, Eagles, Texans. And so that's why I mentioned Tutin is like, we could see a lot more LaQuint Allen playing time that we would prefer early on if the Jaguars are trailing a lot in these games. If they, young team, and if they have any of the early season crap that was happening last year where they're struggling to get the play in and stuff, and like they're getting all these penalties and everything, and they're shooting themselves in the foot against good teams, that's a problem, right? Like they could start out 2-4 or something. That wouldn't shock me given this schedule. And if that's the case, like maybe we do see them shift towards Chris Rodriguez a little bit more or something like that.
Interesting.
So wanted to note that because I'm pretty high on the potential for Tutin. Some quotes I've got here. So Liam Cohen was talking about heavy personnel groupings, which is a hot topic around the NFL, but especially for this team because
I hate it.
Their GM loves to make splashes, and he was like the one who's like, I'm going to lead the charge here, drafting tight end really, really early, top 50 pick. And here's what Liam Cohen said. He personally prefers 12 personnel to 13 personnel, so that's 2 tight ends compared to 3 tight ends. Last year we saw a lot more 3 tight end usage from some teams around the league, and people think that we might see more of that this year. Cohen says he prefers 2 tight ends to 3. He says there's probably going to be an uptick in the NFL next year in heavy personnel groupings. I'm not sure what we're going to do, rotate to a point where we want to get slower or less explosive. We still have some pretty damn good wideouts that I like to use. So I think that makes sense. I think that could be relevant early in the year. If they're playing from behind in some of these games, that we might just see them, do what they did last year, which was go to 11 personnel, air it out, go really pass heavy. Parker Washington's in there being an important piece, especially if they've got really tough perimeter cornerback matchups. You probably see a lot of Parker Washington and Britton Strange. That's how it feels to me looking at the early season schedule. And then I've got some Britton Strange quotes for you. And I just, I love Britton Strange, and I always want to shout him out. I think he's really underrated. This is just a fun quote. He says, I think this was Cohen. It might've been their OC. He says, as much as we love Britton Strange blocking, and he's so tough, he wants to do it. He's physical. He'll bite you. what? But he also missed some time last year, and it's kind of interesting to see what our record looks like. Oh yeah, this was Cohen. It's interesting to see what our record looks like when he has production. Maybe I'm overreacting to this because it's confirmation bias on me thinking that Strange is going to be important for this team, but it felt like he was really important to them last year. And when he was out, it really affected them. And I think it's interesting that the coach is speaking specifically on this and noticing, what matters to the coach. Apparently he's saying that, like, I noticed when Strange was in and productive, that really helped our team, it feels like is what he's saying. And so he's saying, he can block. So Britton, this allows Britton to continue what he does well, but also maybe take some of that wear and tear off and some of that pounding that it takes when you're blocking the Trayvon Walkers of the world. And then getting him matched up more on those linebackers and safeties. Now he's an advantage for us and we have an edge. We always feel good about him blocking at that point of attack, but we needed some help there and being able to provide Strange as an option to maybe split out or go block other people, maybe keep him out of some of those one-on-one big situations. I think that's going to help us tremendously. I think that makes a ton of sense when you think about why did they invest so much into the tight end position here with the blocking tight end. It might not be because they're going to completely overhaul the offense and go away from what worked for them last year and go away from the strength of their team, which is probably their receivers. It might just be because they think Strange is important and they want to keep him healthy and they want to allow him to do other things, which has been important for the offense, which is contribute as a receiver. You buy it?
Not really. Just because. No, because I get it.
Literally, no one will buy the Britton Strange case. And I don't know why.
I like Britton Strange. Don't get me wrong. I'm not buying that they're going to use him the way that he's saying, which is essentially 12 personnel. Strange gets the matchup off, detached from the line of scrimmage, is almost like the big slot. And you have some like this second round tight end, I'm forgetting his name, Burkacher or whatever his name is, this ridiculous pick on your line of scrimmage, taking the grunt of, blocking down on the edge or whatever it may be. I think they're just going to have Brenton Strange in there in 11 on the line of scrimmage as the Y, and then have their three great receivers out there. That's just how I see it, because I don't really agree with what Cohen's saying. Like, maybe it'll keep him healthier and, then you have him. But, like, I don't think they're a better team with two tight ends on the field than they are with three receivers and Strange as the one tight end.
Yeah. I do think it could be a nice finish to the season, though, for what it's worth. So maybe some buy lows on the Jaguars.
I'm a little skeptical, though, of everything regarding the Jags this year. I really am, and I love them. So I just, something strange. It just feels a little off. Their defense is gonna be worse. Like, clearly, they're not gonna have the turnovers they had last year. It's impossible, and they lost their best defensive player. And the leader and middle linebacker and captain of that defense, the red dot wearer. Something is just off about this team. And I'm mostly saying from like the run game standpoint. I'm a little more skeptical about their run game repeating what they did last year. I think they should still be fine in the pass game.
Let's flip it over to the Houston Texans. I think that there could be some early season shootouts for the Texans, which is not necessarily
a nasty looking schedule.
Not what you expect, because the Texans defense is so good.
I meant aesthetically, by the way, just because the Dolphins did a great job of this.
Yeah. Texans, you have Bills in week 1, Bengals in week 2, Colts in week 3, Cowboys in week 4. I think those could all be shootouts. Then you have the Titans. That feels like a David Montgomery game. Jaguars could be a shootout. Then you get Giants and then the bye. So that's pretty interesting to me, where you might have some big production from the passing game earlier, bigger than expected. Obviously, Montgomery could score touchdowns if these are high-scoring games, but it's teams that could put pressure on the Texans defense, which there's not that many of them, but they happen to line up where a lot of them are early in the season. That's Bills, Bengals, Cowboys, maybe the Jaguars,
maybe the Colts,
maybe the Chargers in week 9. Like, I think that's interesting that there could be some big games early where maybe you get a little more passing than normal, because I think this team would prefer to be really run heavy, and might run into more of those games late in the season. But overall, it's a schedule that looks like it could be decently conducive for fantasy success. So I thought that was worth mentioning, because I come in pretty low on the offense overall, because I think it will be a slow-paced offense, preferably.
Sure.
I don't necessarily love their play caller, and it's not concentrated in the way that it used to be. Like, there's like 4 receivers that I think could be good. Woody Marks might play on passing down, so I don't exactly know what's going to happen there. The Texans are one of these teams that did use an early pick on a tight end that they think can help them play bigger personnel packages and stuff. So I don't really know what this offense looks like in terms of where the volume goes. We might see Nico Collins have like a lower target share than expected. But I liked to at least see that, we could see some more back and forth games than just like slogs.
I feel like it's going to be sloggy.
Green Bay Packers. I don't know. Maybe. I feel like a lot of those teams like to play up tempo a little bit. Green Bay Packers have the Vikings on the road in week 1, and then they go on the road against the Jets. So this is feeling a little sloggy to me. Falcons after that. We don't really know what's going to happen with Green Bay, but after that, it gets kind of nice where you might get into some of these shootouts. It's Bucks, Bears, Cowboys, Lions for a month straight before you get Panthers in week 8. So maybe like a sell high window after a couple of months. They do have a lot of tough cornerback matchups on the schedule. To me, between this schedule and some of the tough cornerback matchups, and then also my conversation with Matt Harmon and Ryan Heath, I feel like this sets up really nice for Jaden Reed and Tucker Kraft this year. Obviously, you want them to be healthy. We don't know exactly how that's going to go, but I think this sets up well for the design touch underneath catch and run kind of guys. And I'm a little bit nervous about Christian Watson. One thing I brought up in that episode with Matt is that Christian Watson's splits are actually worse with Romeo Doubs off of the field, which is unusual. Normally when you lose your top receiver, you get more targets and everything. But I think Doubs being off the field means that Watson has to do more of that outside stuff against top cornerbacks and have this, higher average depth of target,
right,
working down the field and everything. So that has me a little bit nervous. I don't know if I'll be drafting a lot of Watson at his price, even though there's clearly a lot of upside for him as an explosive play waiting to happen. And if we get, some shootouts here, which could happen, Bears, Bills, maybe the Saints, maybe the Rams, Patriots, Lions, Cowboys, Bears, Bucks, there's shootout potential here. So maybe Watson just does score a lot of touchdowns, but I also think there could be a lot of inconsistency if he has to be that wide receiver one against some of these cornerbacks.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. The Packers situation is very interesting to me because I think you can make a case for all 3 of those receivers, honestly, at their current cost. But it's also possible they could all be misses, honestly, or that it's very hard to locate on a week-to-week basis, as it has been.
I feel good about Jaden Reed and Tucker Kraft. I mean,
just because their cost, yeah.
I think they're too cheap and they're really talented players. And I think that they're kind of the chess pieces here where they're a little bit matchup independent.
I won't be quitting Matthew. He'll be one of my late round picks in every league.
Matthew Golden.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I don't
no buzz at all, by the way. I've listened to like 40 fantasy podcasts in the last 7 days. I've been driving a lot, Jacob. Heard a bunch of you. I heard you on a couple pods. No talk of Matthew. He gets no hype, which I love. So rare to get that these days.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about him on the episode with Matt.
A little bit with Matt, but nobody's loving him.
Nobody's loving him, that's for sure.
And that's what I like. It's so rare for me to find guys I like that nobody loves at this point. And those are the ones that I really feel good about because I can get them cheap. It's the only ones I can get cheap.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Broncos. The Denver Broncos. Chiefs in week 1, Jaguars week 2, Rams week 3, 49ers week 4. This, again, is like a team that has a really good defense, but kind of like the Texans, they face a lot of teams that could challenge that defense and get things a little bit more high scoring than expected to start the season. Chargers week 5. So maybe it's some big Jalen Waddle games to start out the year. If I remember right, it gets kind of gross after that. But yeah, they do run into some, Rams and Seahawks, especially like really tough defenses. 49ers defense could be better. So we also could see some ugly games. They've got the Panthers on the schedule, which again have really good cornerbacks. Steelers on the schedule too. But could have some more shootouts at the end of the year. I continue to be pretty surprised at where like Vegas has the Broncos. The schedule doesn't look that bad to me. I mean,
let's run through it again.
This stretch right here, week 13 through 15, they've got Dolphins, Jets, Raiders. So that could set up really well for whoever the running back is in the later stretches of the season.
You got a Cardinals in there, Panthers, not bad. Jaguars, I like. Got a lot of good matchups in here. I wonder why Vegas is so low on them as well. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think my takeaway is it could be a hot start for Waddle, and I think post-bye, week 10 bye week, post-bye looks pretty nice for whoever the running back is. So Jonah Coleman, RJ Harvey, whoever you feel like taking shots on, I think that's valid. All right, the Detroit Lions.
Oh yeah, here we are.
Here we are.
This is the team for fantasy this year.
Think so? They weren't quite as high as I would have expected in the environment score.
They weren't. You're right.
I mean, they were high, but just like the Cowboys were clearly ahead of them.
Yep.
I think the Saints game in week 1 could be so fun. I'm really looking forward to that. Just like 2 pocket passers, like where we could just see a lot of pass volume between the Lions and the Saints, and then they get a potential shootout against Josh Allen after that. Maybe a game where Jameer Gibbs goes nuts and they can run a lot against the Jets, then the Panthers and the Cardinals, and then their bye week. I feel good about it. There's a lot of potential shootouts: Patriots, Bucks, Bears, some softer matchups late in the year. On the road against Chicago could be a problem week 17 with weather.
Yeah.
It also could be a fun back and forth game. Detroit, other than that, though, they have the classic, somehow this happens every single year setup. Detroit is in a dome or in Miami, in a dome or in Miami, every single game from week 6 until week 6, from week 7 until week 16.
I think it's only 4 games outdoors for golf or something like that.
Yeah. One of them is
Unreal.
week 17 against the Bears, but
that we don't love, but outside of that, we're good.
Yeah. So I think it makes a lot of sense. Detroit could be massive for fantasy this year.
Petzig could, like Jameer Gibbs with Drew Petzig could be out of this world good. He's my clear number 1 overall player this year. Is he yours or is it Bijan?
Yeah, it's Gibbs for sure.
Yeah, and for me, it's very clear.
Yeah.
And I want to throw the name of I'm forgetting his first name, Seon Vaki out there.
Yep.
I believe it's Seon Vaki. I want to throw that name out there because while I've been high on Pacheco, maybe Pacheco just sucks at football, and we'll find that out this year. We'll see. And if it is, I want in on Vaki because I know a second running back will produce in this offense. That's one thing I feel very confident about.
I gotta say, I've lost faith. Vaki truthers, help me get back on the path because I'm not there. The most recent coach speak I saw on him was like, "Do you think Vaki could matter?" And he's like, "Well, basically, I kind of need him to know how to play running back." It's like,
That's so good. Maybe they sign someone like by the, I don't know. Or maybe Pacheco is back to Pacheco. If Pacheco is back to old Pacheco, like that speed version of Pacheco, he's going to be so much more important in fantasy than I think people are factoring in right now.
Yeah. Dallas Cowboys are next. Pretty simple. Jared's environment score, I think, hit on it. But yeah, it just looks like a fantasy
Just
bonanza.
a print shop, a classic print shop, the Cowboys.
Yeah, they do have.
You can't get them cheap anymore. That's the problem. You could get them cheap last year, Javonte and Pickens. You can't do it anymore.
They do have Eagles twice. They have the Texans. They have the Seahawks in week 13. They have the Rams in week 15. They miss out on a Commanders match from week 18.
Oh, we don't like that.
But I do think they've got enough. I mean, Jaguars, they got enough of these offenses that could 49ers, Colts.
And it also just like doesn't matter. They just produce.
Probably, right.
Yeah.
More so what I was focusing on is they've got enough of these offenses that I think could put points on the board. Packers, Bucks, Ravens.
Gotcha.
And that,
I like that.
That keeps it potentially.
They were really high on his shootout metric, on Smola's shootout metric. So that's good.
Yep. Cincinnati Bengals.
This is one I'm concerned. I'm just concerned in general about our thoughts on Cincinnati. I think they're going to take the biggest jump of any team defensively in the NFL this year, which will impact fantasy. But let's take a look at their schedule.
So they've got the Bucks, then on the road against the Texans, on the road against the Steelers. So those two are tough. After a probably huge week 1, couple tough draws. I'm looking at my notes and I'm like, oh, coach speak on the Bengals, nice, and it's Eric All.
See, your boy.
So let me talk to you about the Bengals and what I think might change here.
Yeah.
I don't think you and I have talked about this. So these are Joe Burrow quotes from, I think, January. Found this on The Athletic. He says, "We're trying to find ways to be explosive in the run game. And I know you've had a tough time with Zach Taylor in the run game in Cincinnati for some time. And so I'm really curious if you buy into this because it's coming from Burrow.
Okay.
I'm really curious what you think of this. Trying to find ways to be explosive in the run game and then try to find some things off of that can get us a couple of easy explosives." Burrow said, "We're committed to that. Our coaching staff has done a great job this offseason of putting a plan together to try to execute that. So I'm excited to see how it works out." You could see Burrow working on under center play action drops no matter the day during the Bengals offseason program. That's where the quarterback took time to outline his view of the journey. This is later. Another quote. "We were heavy under center in 2020, 2021, and that worked out well for us," he said. "But then we were so explosive that we stopped getting the defenses that the under center runs and the under center play actions were built for," which I think is interesting. Right. "And then we weren't explosive in the run game when we faced those light box defenses," which is kind of what you've been so frustrated with, is the way that this run game, it just hasn't been able to take advantage of it, and teams just aren't respecting it. They're just doing pretty simple inside zone stuff out of the shotgun. We transitioned to a gun team in our run game because of our RPOs and our quick game, basically. And the run game was kind of the icing on the cake because of that. And that was effective for a couple of years. But he's just kind of reflecting on like how
this is great, by the way.
I think
love this.
I think that all makes sense, that Burrow is a smart guy, and I'm glad that he's potentially open to some of this stuff, because they've been a very static offense, not used a lot of motion,
right,
and pretty much stuck in the shotgun. And so they're just kind of missing out on a lot of the things that boost efficiency. And Zach Taylor, I believe, like comes from the same coaching tree that loves this kind of stuff. It's possible that maybe he's wanted to do it and we just haven't seen it.
Right.
The other thing is, I do think, and maybe this is silly, but I do think Eric All might be able to help this offense. So Eric All was somebody they drafted high, they had high hopes for. He has said that when he came into the league his first year, he did not feel healthy at all. He felt like his knee was going to give out. But then he says he feels better now than he has in a long, long time. He just didn't play last year, took the whole year to recover. And they've been just very excited about his potential to get back on the field. And this quote from Zach Taylor killed me. He says, Eric All loves football, and he loves the physical portion of football. The word physical in the dictionary is a picture of Eric All trying to put his face through somebody's soul.
That's awesome.
So I think there's reasons to believe that maybe we do see more of this under center run heavy type of stuff from the Bengals, which I wanted to run that by Dan Schneier, because I know you've been very critical of Cincinnati. Well,
it's interesting because in theory, it all checks out really nicely. Burrow's talking about it. Eric All comes from Iowa. If you're a tight end at Iowa, you know how to block. But the reality for me is, like, there hasn't been too much wrong with this offense. Sure, the running game could be a lot better if they went under center, or if they had more of, like, because some teams run really well out of the gun. They use more power gap. If they were smart, like a team that could do that a little bit better, I think that would work. But ultimately speaking, like, it's kind of an if it ain't broke, don't fix it situation in my mind, Jacob. And I don't think they're going to try to really fix it. They may talk now like they're going to try to fix it. It's the offseason. You can talk about a lot of things. But the reality is Burrow's at his best when he is in the gun and he is able to scan the defense. He's the best in the NFL at doing it. So I just don't think any other offense really suits or takes advantage of who he is as a quarterback better than what they've run. And I think you're right. Like, Zach Taylor comes from a different style, but he's kind of just been like, yeah, man, I like, even same with Joe Brady, right? Like, when Joe Brady was at LSU, he didn't run the same Bills offense we see them running now. Joe Brady, like, he ran that same offense we see Burrow running now at LSU with Burrow, because I almost just feel like the coaches have to default to him because he's that good at processing pre to post snap, and specifically post snap. So I don't think we'll see the change ultimately. That will be my guess on it.
I think if we do, it could be fun. Like, they've got
Dolphins. Could be, yeah.
They've got Titans, they've got Falcons, they've got some teams where I think they could be playing with a lead and running late in the season. They have Commanders, Saints, Browns, Panthers, like definitely the games where they.
You know what? Maybe that's where we'll see it, when they have a lead because their defense is better and they don't and they can actually experiment with this stuff because they haven't had that a lot. So you know what? I'm open to that happening in like the second half of games.
Yeah, and Chase Brown has been better from under center for what it's worth. I think that we saw some of that at the end of the year last year, and I think we could see them build on it more and more. Sure. The next team I want to talk about are the Cleveland Browns. The Browns here, I think, have a pretty nice setup. What's
just Browns having a nice setup. It's just like, can't you?
Who knows, like, how that goes, if anybody benefits from it. But a potential shootout in week 1 and week 2 on the road against the Jaguars, on the road against the Bucs. Games they're probably going to have to be
hot weather games. I like it.
Yeah, pressure on them to pass a lot, I think. It does get a little ugly after that, but I could see, like, Harold Fanta coming out really big in the first couple of weeks, and maybe then you have a sell window on him. Panthers, Steelers, kind of gross games here. Jets, Ravens, Titans, Steelers. I think a lot of those games could be gross.
Very nasty.
But then the
Texans.
The late season schedule was really, really nice. So just wanted to mention that, like, maybe buy back in there, maybe sell Fannin after week 2.
I believe so much in Todd Monken. All the stats bear it out. He's been one of the best coaches at putting them in plus run concepts. And from a pass standpoint, he uses a lot of pre-snap motion and gets a lot of the cheat code plays. So I want to believe there's a little more upside. It just kind of depends how you feel, in my mind, about two things. Their offensive line, that they've done the Texans strategy of completely revamping, but maybe not good. And it may just be new guys that aren't good. We'll see. That never really feels great to me when that's the plan. And then 2, just like, what do you feel about the quarterback situation? Because I don't know, man. I I feel a little better than most do on Watson, which is disgusting to say out loud for a multitude of reasons. And ultimately, he could just stink again. His arm looked pretty shot the last time he played. But I think if Sanders gets in there, it's over. That's just a horrific offense with him at quarterback. He's, in my mind, not an NFL quarterback.
If you're a believer in the rookie wide receivers, the late season schedule looks nice for them. And that's when we often see wide receivers break out.
Yeah.
Chicago Bears. The Bears open up against the Panthers, the Vikings, the Eagles. Pretty rough. Then they get the Jets. Maybe the Packers are another team that likes to be really run heavy. Maybe the Falcons are more run heavy this year. Some kind of gross games early on. Seahawks in week 8. So don't love that, but I do think maybe kind of buy low window on Luther Burden or something like that if they struggle out of the gate. Because things get pretty nice after that. I like the late season schedule for the Bears.
Let's see the late season schedule. We have Lions I saw in there, obviously. Bills, Packers. Yeah, there's some shootout potential toward the end. For sure. I think,
all right.
Yep, go ahead.
Carolina Panthers. We've got the Bears week 1, Falcons after that, then the Browns, then the Lions, and week 5. Bye. So pretty nice opening month. Could see it being a good start for Chuba Hubbard, depending on what the workload is there. Could see after a month of football, Chuba being like a top 15 running back or something for fantasy. If these games are kind of high scoring, I think these defenses are ones that can be run on potentially. Then he's got the Eagles coming out of the bye. So wanted to mention that. You might have like a Tedero McMillan bye window after that Eagles game. It gets a little bit better after that. But overall, I'm kind of avoiding the Panthers. And if you need any more reason to their fantasy playoff schedule, they've got the Steelers and the Seahawks in week 16 and 17.
Yeah, very few teams I'm avoiding in fantasy this year. This is one of them for sure for me.
Next up is the Buffalo Bills. Bills get Texans week 1. Tough defense, but could be a shootout. Lions week 2 could be a shootout. Chargers week 3 could be a shootout. Patriots, Rams, both could be shootouts. Then you've got the Raiders before a week 7 bye. So pretty nice start for them. A couple of things I wanted to mention from the coach speak is that early this offseason, Joe Brady said he basically just called Khalil Shakir like one of their best players. And he said, and nobody remembers that Khalil Shakir exists, but he said DJ Moore is going to make life a lot easier for Shakir with DJ Moore's presence on the outside, which I think is interesting. Since then, all Joe Brady has done is rant and rave about Dalton Kincaid and to a lesser extent, Keon Coleman. So I'm curious if you buy that at all. It's kind of a tough schedule if you're looking just at the cornerback 1 matchups. It's kind of a tough schedule for DJ Moore. But Joe Brady's used a lot of motion and has experience with Moore working inside and out back in Carolina. Like he might know how to kind of avoid some of those matchups. And then also if these games are just shootouts, I don't know if it will matter too much for Moore, who we're kind of drafting more for like the touchdown upside than I think, hoping he's going to get a 70, 80, 90 yards per game or whatever.
Yeah, this is a tough team for me. I've been struggling a lot, Jacob, this offseason, figuring out where I value DJ Moore. And same could be probably said about Kincaid or Shakir, any of these passing game weapons. I want to believe in my head that it's just impossible for the Bills defense to be as injured as it was last year. And in that sense that they're going to be a much better defense and the game script's going to look a lot different than it was last year. But even last year, they still stuck to running the ball despite having a bad defense. Like that's just how they operate this offense. Some have suggested with McDermott gone, Joe Brady will be able to take the shackles off the offense, but this was his offense. I don't really believe that McDermott played a big role in limiting him. So it's tough for me. I've failed so many times, Jacob, trying to buy the number 1 projected receiver for Josh Allen or the number 2 projected receiver, guys like Keon Coleman, and miss after miss after miss. It has me very hesitant, and I don't like to use past conjecture to impact my my future projections. But I almost feel like this offense is going to remain pretty similar to what we've seen.
Yeah, that's fair. Baltimore Ravens are next. 3 teams remain, Dan. We've almost made it 2.5 hours in. This is classic MVP stuff.
This is old school. Yeah.
We haven't dug one out like this in a while.
Yeah, dug it out. I love that.
Baltimore has a really difficult cornerback 1 schedule. I don't know how much that's going to matter for Zay Flowers, another player who might move around a lot.
Yeah.
They also have a lot of potential shootouts. So week 1 on the road against the Colts, and they've got Saints, Cowboys, Tennessee Titans seems like a Derrick Henry 40-point game. Falcons, Browns, more and more Derrick Henry games. Then they go Bengals, Bills, Jaguars, Chargers, like all of that a lot. A couple of tough matchups before the Week 13 bye. And then they get Bucks, Steelers, Browns, Bengals to close it out. I just realized I haven't had the screen shared the whole time, but hopefully you could follow that as I talk through it. How do you feel about this Ravens schedule? I think it's pretty nice.
It does shape out pretty nicely. This is an interesting team for fantasy. There's a lot of upside with the potential for a brand new offense, really, with Doyle getting the quarterback under center. There's guys I like in this offense. Flowers I love. You know that. Everyone's heard us talk so much about him last offseason. The only issue is he's getting steamed up a lot by fantasy analysts now. So I am a bit worried, Jacob, he's going to reach a point where I no longer see the value on. But I'll tell you one guy that I'm going to draft a lot of, and it's disgusting to hear, but I've been talking about it all offseason. I will be a Mark Andrews guy this year, without a doubt in my mind. Remember how high I was on Kelsey last year?
Yeah.
Which I guess kind of worked out if we really think about it, because he did finish inside that top 10, which is basically, I think it'll be a very similar situation this year for Andrews. He'll be priced in this tight end 17, 18, whatever range he's in right now, or 16, 15. I don't know where it is. I don't care. And it'll be like the tight end 8. It's a very small value win, but I could very much so see it happening in a Declan Doyle offense.
Atlanta Falcons open up against Pittsburgh Steelers. That's gross.
This team scares me, man.
Carolina Panthers. That's gross. Some tough cornerback matchups there. Maybe Drake London's a buy low if the offense just looks abysmal and he is not playing well. The Falcons might lose a bunch of games early on, so I think we're probably going to see both quarterbacks at some point during the season. So Steelers, Panthers, Packers, Saints, both on the road. Ravens, Bears, 49ers, Bucks, Bengals, Chiefs before their Week 11 bye. That's a lot of games that I think the Falcons are probably going to lose.
Yeah, they're going to lose a lot of games. Hopefully that means good things from a game script standpoint. I don't know, man. I don't know what to expect of Tua without McDaniel. I know what to expect of Penix if he's healthy, at least, but I don't know if he's going to be healthy and when he's going to be healthy. It's also possible that some of the inconsistencies in his game when it comes to just locking into first reads, doing horrific when it comes to dealing with pressure, compact more and defenses get more tape on him and it gets worse there. So I am I'm having a tough time. As much as I love Drake London, I'm having a tough time with where he's ranked ADP wise. I'm having a tough time with Kyle Pitts, despite, I know Heath's really high on Kyle Pitts because of the fantasy factor. I'm having a tough time there. Even to an extent, like in my auctions, I won't be buying Bijan Robinson after losing Zach Robinson and losing that blocking scheme. And with the quarterback play as it is, like, I get why he'll be ranked 2 and I'll have him ranked 2, but it's just not going to be an auction buy for me. Whereas I might buy Gibbs because I could see, all-time upside there. So yeah, this is a team to avoid for me, I think, for sure.
You might not have gotten to it yet because I'm putting out a full feature length film every single day on Beyond the Box Score right now. But yesterday's episode, I was like, what's the difference really effectively between Devon Achane and Bijan Robinson? Like, they're sort of different players in terms of style. I think Bijan is probably the most effective running back in the whole league at consistently churning out positive plays and making something out of nothing.
Yeah.
And that's borne out in the data. Like, his ability to create on runs where he's hit at or behind the line of scrimmage is really rare. But I think the way that they score their points is like on a bad team through a lot of volume and a lot of receptions. And then if you look at the two, HN is like clearly the focal point on his team. Whereas Bijan has other players you want to get the ball to. Even like maybe is not a relevant point, but like Zachariah Branch could be. They've talked about him as like being one of the top 2 or 3 targets on the team. And I think the way you get into the ball is short yardage stuff. So does that affect Bijan Robinson? A lot of the stuff we saw from Bijan last year in terms of working out wide and in the slot and stuff like that could be different this year with different play caller. And I don't know that necessarily means that Bijan's a bad pick. Sure, go with Jamar over him or whatever if that's your preference. But to me, it's more just like, why are we freaking out so much about Achane? I think the clear difference is that we just don't think that Malik Willis will throw to the running back position as much as like Tua, which is totally fair. But what if, this is assuming rational coaching, which I don't know if is fair with Bobby Slope. We just don't know what to expect. But what if Achane isn't just a running back? What if they have other running backs they like? They talk about the other 2 guys a lot, and they use Achane more in motion and stuff and more in different creative ways to get him the ball in space as a receiver, which is something that we've seen him be able to do. I don't know. I think he's pretty underrated. I
kind of love that talking point, but I have never really thought of it in that prism. Like, how different is Bijan from Achane. Situationally, I actually think Achane's situation is better, if that makes sense somehow, because of the things you went over. And I think their blocking is better. I don't know. It's interesting. But he's seemingly done okay with it in the past, Bijan. I guess that's the point. Like, he's never had a good offensive environment.
One last team here. Let's wrap with the Arizona Cardinals. So we've alluded to it. Let's see this schedule. Week one on the road against the Chargers. Week
This is
2,
so unfair.
Week 2 against the Seahawks, 0-2. Week 3 on the road against the 49ers, 0-3. Week 4 on the road against the Giants. I mean, probably 0-4. Maybe they win that game.
Yeah.
Week 5, Lions. Week 6 on the road against the Rams. Week 7, Broncos. Week 8 on the road against the Cowboys. Week 9 on the road against the Seahawks.
Rams.
Chiefs. Commanders.
Finally,
maybe is a win.
Well, maybe they beat the Commanders in week 12.
Eagles. Week 13.
God.
Mercifully, the bye week arrives all the way to week 14 after almost 4 months of pummeled.
Pain.
Thanks for playing, Cardinals.
God, that makes me like, it's so hard to buy these guys for fantasy, but they have so many fun, talented offensive skill position players. It's crazy, dude.
And then they get to the fantasy playoffs, and it's like, oh, Jets, Saints, Raiders.
Right.
That could be fun, but it's like,
Right.
who's even alive at that point? Like, whoever is standing at the end of the season, go Trey Benson, go.
Well, that is interesting from the standpoint, Jacob, of like, if you're playing fantasy this year, this is probably actually a team from a skill position standpoint you might want to try to trade for at your trade deadline, because they'll be so bad by that point. Love will have sucked, Wilson, Harrison, McBride, they might all be playing worse than their draft position. Might be the time to trade for them then. The only issue with that is like, I'm not Glennon, I keep calling him Glennon. Is Carson Beck like so bad at football that like we're looking at like these 120 to 180 yard offensive games, which I think is certainly within the realm of possibility. I think I guess he was drafted in round 3, but I just think he's not a capable NFL player. So we'll see about that.
The Glennon thing is cracking me up. All right, Dan, we got to call it there. This is plenty, I think, for the sickos.
Yes.
To satiate them. But just in case it's not, for anybody who has made it 2.5 hours, what do you recommend, Dan, as their next bingeable content? There's so much to eat up here on Beyond the Box Score. What do you think? We got the Rich Rebar transformative coaching changes. What would you recommend next to whoever the 2-3 hour video watcher?
I'm actually going to recommend one that we did recently, because I recently listened to all of our pods over the week, and I had a lot of driving to do. I'm going to do the running back breakout show with Theo Greminger. I just really like Theo's analysis, and we haven't had him on yet. I think he's a rising star in the fantasy football industry. I think people will gain a lot from listening to him break down running backs on that episode.
Theo's great. Love that recommendation. I've been putting together some playlists for y'all. So if you just came back into the fantasy football space, I got like a welcome back playlist where you can go. It's curated in order and just listen to a bunch of good stuff. Theo's episode is the 3rd one on here. Some really good stuff there. Got this like the player deep dives all here in one place for you. NFL draft playlist as well. So shout out to our producers for helping put those together as well. Thank you all for being here. Please hit subscribe. Anything else, Plug God? You ready to get out of here?
No, let's go. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your week. We'll see you again tomorrow and Thursday for the live. And we will also tell you this. Hit the like button right now. Please support the show. We need to grow before the start of the season. The way to do that is 3 simple things you can do for us. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the like button constantly. Every show you click on, every show you listen to. And then finally, leave comments, both before and after and during the show. Otherwise, have a great rest of your week. We'll talk to you soon.